Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the second part of WhatIf Deku became the Midnight Vigilante. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Shouta's son is a brat. Why did Shouta ever let him and Nezu meet? Oh, right, it was that, or Izuku ending up in Tartarus. Unfortunately, having most of his education taken care of by Nezu, Izuku learned many things from the rat Satan. Exploiting loopholes was one of them. Izuku promised he would sleep, and he did. He slept at 5:30 am when he wakes up every day at 6 am, but he did sleep, which means that Class 1 will have to deal with a sleep-deprived Izuku. And a sleep-deprived Izuku is a brutally sincere and unfiltered Izuku. Shouta just hopes that no one leaves traumatized. But just in case, before homeroom, he talks to Inui and warns him that some students may end up having to visit him earlier than planned. But well, there are other things to take care of that morning. Like the infestation of vultures, the press that are at the gates harassing the students trying to get some statement from someone regarding All Might as a teacher. How does the giant buffoon manage to cause trouble even when he is not around? This means that Shouta has to stand at the entrance helping the students to get in safely. Perfect. How could his day start in a better way? To make matters worse, upon entering the teacher's lounge, Power Loader was trying to fix the coffee maker because apparently, Shouta's #1 headache source broke it earlier. Apparently, the machine burned his hand, so the idiot punched it. Well, no coffee for Shouta. It's not like he wasn't already in a bad mood. As he enters the room, at least everyone is silent. Great, he makes an announcement. Today, you'll have to do a special activity. Shouta pauses dramatically and secretly relishes on the kids' panicked faces. You'll elect the class representative. Such a normal activity. Most cheer, but Shouta quickly silences them with his usual Shouta glare. Any questions? All 19 students raised their hands. You can't elect Izuku. Everyone lowered their hands. Volunteers. Why did he ask that? Immediately the class erupts in chaos, with almost everyone volunteering for the position. Shouta sighs and starts entering his sleeping bag. I'll take a nap. Don't wake me up unless someone is dying. From there, the Shouta tunes down their discussion, only replying when Iida asks if voting is an acceptable method to elect. I don't care what method you chose as long as you decide before the end of homeroom. Fortunately, this class is minimally logical. They end up electing Yaoyorozu as president and Iida as vice president. Good choices. After that, at the end of homeroom, Shouta takes the list that Izuku gave him earlier and announces, "Attention, Hellspawn. One by one during today's class you will be called into Izuku's office. Yes, he has an office, to discuss your quirk, fighting style, clothing. Izuku is a licensed and approved analyst by both HSPC and Nezu, so I recommend you make good use of this chance." Then he called the first one. Yaoyorozu, you first. The rest will continue with your normal classes. Someone takes notes to pass her later. Then he points the direction for Izuku's office and makes his way to his next class. Whatever Izuku does, now it's with them. Yaoyorozu Momo. 5 minutes after the first signal, Izuku hears the first person knocking on their door, so he puts a friendly smile on their face and calls in. Come in. Then the door opens, and Yaoyorozu enters. Yaoyorozu-san, congratulations for being elected, Zuku said, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, she replied shyly. Izuku, Zuku, Kuzu, Poltergeist, Ifrit, Duality. Pick one, but please don't call us Aizawa. It will only be confusing when my father and I are together, Kuzu insisted. I know it can be a bit confusing, but in time everyone learns to distinguish between us, Zuku offered, getting up. Jasmine tea. Thank you, Yaoyorozu replied, nodding. Then you can call me Momo. It's only fair. As you wish, Momo-san, Kuzu said. 5 minutes later, each one had a teacup in their hands, and Zuku went straight to the point. All right, I'll be blunt with my question, Momo. Are you really comfortable with your costume? Kuzu asked, sipping his tea. Well, not really, but there wasn't much choice, Momo explained. I need to have my skin exposed to use my quirk. But even so, my costume is showing more than I expected. Are you familiar with DNA suits? Zuku asked. It was my first plan, she admitted. But there was a note in my case saying that it was impossible to make something like that for a first year. Bullshit, Kuzu growled. Language, Kuzu, Zuku scolded. English if you may, Kuzu replied. Anyway, there's no such a thing. I'll bring this to Power Loader later, and we'll remake your costume, Zuku explained. Your costume at the moment is unacceptable. It doesn't offer any protection. Not even Midnight is that exposed. I get the impression that this is less a case of impracticality and more a situation of perverted students. Gross. We don't need another Minta, we just got rid of one. Kuzu continued. I see, Momo replied, between shock and confusion. Now, I want your opinion on this, Zuko said, telepathically pulling out one of the notebooks on the shelf. This one had a periodic table on the cover. Your control over your quirk is already awesome, so there is not much to discuss for the moment. I have drawn some designs for your new costume, but your opinion is essential. The rest of the session was spent with Izuku and Momo discussing the redesign of her costume and possible support gear for her. At the end of the session, Izuku asked her to call Uraraka when she returned to class. Uraraka Achako. All right. Who was the idiot who thought it was a good idea to put heels on a combat costume? Kuzu asked, looking up from the notebook with an astronaut on the cover. I never asked for heels, and the costume is much tighter than I thought it would be. Uraraka explained. One more thing to ask Power Loader later. Zuko sighed. I feel that we will end up with an entire support class expelled. Well, let's talk about your quirk for a bit. Kuzu said. You should start carrying nausea medicine in your belt. Zuko suggested. Should you need any more specific medication, I'm sure Recovery Girl can arrange it. Just talk to her. I also suggest you do some tests to make sure your quirk doesn't cause you any permanent damage. Other than that, you should slowly start raising your limit. And of course do some hand-to-hand training since you need to get closer to be effective. Kuzu continued. And put extra protection on your hands. The 5-point contact quirk means that if someone breaks or cuts your fingers, you are in trouble. Bakugo Katsuki. Hey, Lord Explosion Murder. Kuzu greeted when Katsuki entered. Don't start, Kuzu. Zuko scolded, then turned to Katsuki. Well, Bakugo, just to make things clear, what we say here are simply suggestions. You can ignore us if you want, but being a certified analyst with Nedzu's approval, we like to think we know what we're talking about. Bakugo simply nodded, avoiding Izuku's eyes. At least he's not yelling. Izuku waited a few awkward seconds. Well, Izu, they said at the same time. You first, Zuko conceded. Can we talk? Katsuki asked. About everything. Look, Bakugo, this meeting is to talk about your hero costume and your quirk. Kuzu explained. If you really want to talk, wait for us in front of the classroom after dismissal. All right. Katsuki nodded, then gestured for the notebook. What do you have there? I'm happy you asked. Zuko grinned and pulled the notebook with the nuclear explosion on the cover. Now, how do you feel about putting shock-absorbing braces under your gauntlets? Iida Tenya. Look, Iida-kun. It's nice that you admire your brother that much, Zuko said slowly, trying to pass his point as clearly as possible. But all that armor, how does it help you? You're not ingenium, Iida, you are your own hero. Ajiro Mishirao. What kind of martial art did you say you practiced? Again, Kuzu asked. You're pretty good at it. But maybe it's time to try varying a little. You already have some bad habits that I assume come from always fighting against the same person. Hagakure Toru. Boots and gloves. Her entire costume are only boots and gloves. Kuzu yelled while Zuko tried to muffle him. Oh, no, someone will get expelled. How dare they do something like that to a teenage girl? Sorry, Hagakure-san. We should have checked this before. Zuko bowed to her. But this will be fixed, don't worry. Sato Rikido. Well, I would suggest carrying some energy gummies with you. Can't have you falling asleep because of your quirk in dangerous moments. Zuko said. You should also try thinking a bit more before rushing. Brute force will not always be enough. Ashido Mina. Have you tried having a little chat with Yaoyorozu? Zuko suggested. She can help you better understand the chemistry behind your acid, and from there you can further increase your potency and/or versatility. Asui Tsuyu. Asu. Call me Tsu. Hero. Okay. Tsu. Kuzu tried again. I'm dying to know how the hell you found out you could spit out your own stomach. But we can discuss that later. For now, tell me a little more about yourself. To what extent does your quirk affect your natural instincts? Zuko continued. Shiro Hanta. Your mobility is nothing to laugh at, and you have a huge potential for quick captures. Zuko started. But I have noticed a bad habit of underestimating your opponents. This kind of thing usually takes care of itself after the third time you have your ass handed to you by someone who seems weak. Kuzu interjected. But how about not letting it come to that? Jiru Kyoyuka. You urgently need noise cancellers, Kuzu said. And just like present Mike, your quirk will benefit immensely from proper support gear. I will schedule a conversation with Power Loader and pass the notes I have to him. He will certainly know what to do. Zuko continued. Ayama Yuuga. First of all, take this note and go to Recovery Girl, Zuko said as soon as the French boy entered. Until I am sure how your organs respond to your quirk, I can't give you any useful advice. So we will do some tests, and then we can discuss the results. Kirishima Ijiru. Bare chest. Really? Kuzu deadpanned. I'm not sure about what your idea of manly is, but there's a line between manly and dumb. Zuko continued. I know they say that men live less, but still, you don't need to try to prove these statistics. So how about we sit down and discuss how to keep you protected and at the same time maintain all your manliness? Kuzu cheered. Shaoji Mezu. You, my good sir, have one of the most versatile quirks I have ever seen, Kuzu said. And you are very quiet. Have you ever thought of practicing stealth? Zuko suggested. As a scout you would be unstoppable. Not to mention that your strength leaves many heroes in the dust. Kuda Koji, don't worry, I can sign. Zuko said softly. Let me ask you, can you communicate with any type of animal? Any real animal? Kuda signed. Doesn't work on people with mutations, for example. Interesting and versatile. Kuzu praised. What about insects? Are they considered animals? The last four are probably the most problematic. But Izuku came prepared. Tokoyami Fumikage. Hi, Tokoyami-san. Zuko greeted as soon as he saw the crow's head on his door. Good morning, Zuko-sensei, Kuzu-sensei. Oh, interesting. Tokoyami is the first one to greet both. Take a seat. We have much to talk about. Kuzu pointed at the chair, and Tokoyami quickly sat down. Then Zuko picked up an apple and gave it to Tokoyami. Can you call Dark Shadow? I want to talk to both of you. Tokoyami nodded, then the familiar shadow crow emerged from his stomach and curled above his shoulder. Tokoyami gave the apple to the shadow, which immediately started pecking at it. Let's start with the easy part. Zuko pulled the notebook with a crow on the cover. Your costume is great, well planned, and offer protection in the key parts. I imagine that the cloak serves to cast a shadow to help Dark Shadow. Am I correct? Your assumptions are correct. Tokoyami confirmed. This is Fumi, always worrying about little old me. Dark Shadow nuzzled Tokoyami's face, who looked away but didn't deny. Well, I have a question for Dark Shadow. Kuzu said. Yesterday, during the training, you ignored Tokoyami's commands and charged at us. Why? Who would have thought that a crow-shaped shadow would have the ability to look ashamed? It was dark. Dark Shadow said shyly. Kuzu raised an eyebrow, and Tokoyami started explaining. Dark Shadow is greatly affected by brightness. He's docile when it's bright, too much light, and he becomes timid. The Raven Boy explained. But when it's dark, the opposite happens. He becomes vicious and unruly. Zuko scribbled a few lines in the notebook. And do you have any idea of why he acts like that? Do you share feelings? No, we don't. Dark Shadow said. I am a quirk, but I have my own mind and feelings. We could test this with Shinso-kun's help later. Zuko started muttering. I wonder if he could brainwash Tokoyami through Dark Shadow responses, or the opposite. Would one of them be able to snap the other? WhatIf? He was interrupted by a karate chop on the head. Ouch, Kuzu. You were muttering again. Kuzu shrugged. Mayday. Zuko pouted, then looked back at Tokoyami. How bad can it get? If it's too dark, I might lose myself completely. Dark Shadow admitted. It happened only once. Tokoyami explained. Dark Shadow went completely berserk and started attacking anything that moved. We ended up hurting our father. After that, he didn't finish, but it wasn't necessary. Izuku saw his files. Tokoyami is in foster care, and the implications are clear. Fortunately, Tokoyami shows no signs of abuse or neglect, but Izuku knows how cruel the system can be to children who have weak mutations or so-called villainous quirks, and Dark Shadow fits in two of these cases. Even without signs, Izuku will at least check to see if he is really safe. That is why Fumi sleeps with a nightlight. Dark Shadow continued. How old were you? Zuko gently asked. 8. Tokoyami replied, clarifying. Thank you for telling us. Kuzu nodded and threw another apple at Dark Shadow. And the crow immediately perked up and snatched the apple in the air. Whatever they told you, Tokoyami, what happened was not your fault. Zuko continued. You were only a kid, and still is. As for the problem at hand, Kuzu continued. We'll help you with it. Help us? Dark Shadow asked. How? It depends on what you are willing to try. Zuko explained. The first thing you need is to overcome the fear of your quirk. I don't fear Dark Shadow. Not in the traditional way. Zuko continued. But yes, you are afraid. If you didn't, you wouldn't have problems with the dark. We'll help you control Dark Shadow, even when there is absolutely no light. Kuzu continued. And also help Dark Shadow to control himself. But for this we will need extra time. Would you be willing to meet us at the Field Omega on Tuesdays after class? Zuko asked. Tokoyami pondered for a few seconds, absent-mindedly petting Dark Shadow. Then after a few seconds, he nodded. Very well. There's no harm in trying, he said, and Dark Shadow nodded along with him. Izuku smiled brightly at them. Remember, Tokoyami, none of this is mandatory. If you feel that it's not working for you, you can tell me and we'll stop. No hard feelings. Zuko explained, and Tokoyami nodded again. You can go back for now. Would you mind calling Todoroki next? As you wish. Then Tokoyami got up and left the room. Todoroki Shadow. The heterochromatic boy entered the room about 5 minutes later. Face inexpressive as always, he nodded at Izuku, who gestured for the chair in front of him, and Todoroki sat down. Zuko pulled out the notebook with two men in navy suits on the cover facing each other. One in a red suit with lava on the background, and the other in a white suit with blue sleeves with snow on the background. How are the classes going, Todoroki-kun? Kuzu asked first. Just fine, sensei, Todoroki replied. What do you want to discuss? Now, this will have to be handled delicately, so they decided to start with the lesser of the many problems that seem to have the same origin. For starters, your costume, Zuko said. Denied. Frankly, I don't know who approved it, but he should be fired. What do you mean? Todoroki asked in visible confusion. Does he really see nothing wrong? Todoroki, the biggest drawback of your quirk is frostbite, and you see nothing wrong with going into the field with half your body frozen. Kuzu deadpanned. Are you serious? You are resistant to temperature variation, not immune. Zuko continued. Frankly, this problem would be easily solved if you used your fire to balance your temperature. No, Todoroki slammed his hands on the table. I'll never use it. Then he started getting up. This is a waste of time. Sit down, Todoroki, Kuzu commanded. If you want to ignore what I have to say, that is your choice, but at least you will listen to me. Todoroki hesitantly sat back down, his eyes focusing on anything other than Izuku's. As long as he's listening, Izuku will not chide him for it. Tell me, Todoroki, are you being serious about this? Being a hero? Zuko asked. Of course I am, Todoroki replied. Are you, though? Let's get down to the facts, Kuzu said harshly. You refuse to use your fire, which means that no matter what you try, you are only using half of your potential. How is this being serious? I won't use his quirk, Todoroki repeated. This is practically a mantra by now. I don't need his quirk. Do you really believe that? Kuzu continued. You don't know anything, Todoroki said. You don't know what Endeavor did. Believe me, Todoroki, I know a thing or two about bastard parents with fire quirks, Kuzu replied. You, Todoroki stopped and blinked at him. What, do you know about the eye burner? Zuko asked. Serial killer. He terrorized Musutafu for more than 10 years. Killed people with green eyes. What does this have to do with anything? Todoroki was confused, but Izuku had his full attention. His quirk was fire-breathing, Kuzu explained, then arched his head upwards and blew a small flame. Pretty self-explanatory. Wait, are you Midoriya Hisashi? That was his name, Zuko said. Midoriya Izuku. That was our name before Shouta adopted us. Then he looked Todoroki in the eyes and asked, So, do you really think we don't understand you? Todoroki hesitated for a few seconds, going through what Izuku just told him. He wants me to surpass All Might, he finally said. He did everything for this goal. He bought my mother and forced her into a quirk marriage. My 3 older siblings, he considered all of them failures. My oldest brother died because of him. I refused to be his tool. I just showed you my quirk, Todoroki. The quirk I inherited from a villain who is locked up in Tartarus. Do you think this quirk is his? Kuzu said. It is not. My sperm donor could only breathe fire. I can breathe and create fire from any other part of my body. My flames can reach temperatures he never dreamed of reaching. He jabbed a finger in his chest. This quirk is not his. It is mine. Then he pointed at Todoroki. That quirk is not his. It's yours. And fuck whatever Endeavor tries to say. He won't last long. Todoroki looked down at his hands again. I don't know if I'm ready yet. And you don't have to be, Zuko said gently. I will not force you to do anything. But we will work until you can use your flames comfortably. And if you want to surpass All Might, it will be of your own free will, not his. On Wednesdays, starting next week, meet us at Field Omega. Kuzu continued. And every time you find yourself thinking that your quirk belongs to Endeavor, I want you to repeat these words. This quirk is mine, and Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass. Todoroki actually chuckled when he heard this. All right, Todoroki nodded. Then he took a deep breath and continued. This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass. His lips curved into the smallest of the smiles. This is kinda nice to say. Therapeutic. I know, right? Kuzu grinned. Please stop corrupting him, Kuzu. Zuko chided. And Todoroki, hang on just a little longer. Endeavor can do whatever he wants. He will face the consequences of his actions. Okay, Todoroki nodded. Can I go now? Just a second, Zuko said, then scribbled something on his notebook, tore the page, and gave it to Todoroki. If you want to treat these bruises that you are hiding, give this note to Recovery Girl, and she will know what it is about. No questions asked. Todoroki nodded and got up to leave. He stopped at the door and gave a last glance at Izuku. Thank you, sensei. You don't have to thank me, Todoroki. Zuko waved at him. Any teacher here would have done the same. But no one ever did it before. So thank you. Todoroki nodded again. You're welcome, Kuzu replied. Now, get going. There's 2 more problem children to deal with, and we'd like to end this before lunch. Right. Lunch Rush said he would make katsudon today, and we'd hate to lose, Zuko said, almost drooling. I'll be going then, Todoroki said. Can you call Kaminari next? Sure. Then he left. Kaminari Denki. When Kaminari entered the office, there was an aquarium filled with water, a faucet on Kuzu's table, and no fish. Izuku gestured for him to sit down. Kaminari sat down and looked into Izuku's eyes for a few seconds. Oh, he's trying to figure out which one he's talking to. Hey, He tried greeting. Zuko, both, Kuzu said, giggling. Look, a blue and a yellow eye. He leaned closer so Kaminari could see better. Before starting to argue, Kaminari picked up his phone and asked, Hey, could you give me your number? Zuko raised an eyebrow but wrote it on a paper for him. Here, why? He asked. Iida wants to make a group chat for the class, but no one has your number. Kaminari explained while putting the number on his phone. And yeah, I know you are technically our teacher, but you're also the same age as us, so we wanted to include you. Oh, and Zuko got a message on his phone. And there was a video archive attached to a new number when he looked. Kuzu owes me a batch of cookies. Zuko checked the recording briefly. It was the recording of what Dad said yesterday to All Might during class. Oh, they'll have to play this tonight. This will be better than a film night. Perfect. Kuzu grinned at Kaminari. I'll bring your cookies tomorrow. Right. What is this? Kaminari pointed to the aquarium. It's for a demonstration. We'll get to it, Zuko said, then opened the Pikachu notebook. So, Kaminari-kun, let's start with your costume. Sure, Kaminari said, slightly nervous. I like your costume. It's simple, stylish, and functional, Kuzu explained. My only recommendation is that you order some kind of plating to wear under the costume. You can never have too much extra protection. It's a nice idea. Kaminari smiled. Now, the elephant in the room. Kuzu started, and Kaminari's smile fell. Your quirk is short-circuiting your brain. Yeah, it happens when I go over my limit, Kaminari said, scratching the back of his head. I end up like you saw for about an hour. But that is all. It's not so bad. It is that bad, Kaminari, Zuko replied. Brain damage is no joke. It can cause you permanent damage if not treated. And that is what we are here to solve. Kuzu continued. Zuko stood up and put a disposable cup under the faucet. Let's suppose that this is you. The water would be the electricity inside your body. Zuko explained. By the way, are you a battery or a generator? Emma, what now? Kaminari asked in visible confusion. Do you generate electricity or just store it? Kuzu explained. Depending on the answer, the route to take will be different. Oh, I see. Kaminari smiled again. I generate it. Great, back to the example. Zuko pointed to the aquarium again. Having your quirk under control, you can decide how much power you want to use, similar to this tap. He opened the faucet slowly, and the cup started to fill. But the way you're using it, Zuko raised his arm towards the tap. It's like doing this. He pulled his arm, ripping the tap from the aquarium, and Kaminari rushed to get out of the water's way. There is no control, and in the end, you are depleted and can't do anything else, even if we disregard airhead mode. Then he raised his arm again, collecting all of the spilled water and pulling it back into the aquarium, then putting back the tap. Any question? Kuzu asked. I've been trying to control my quirk for a long time, but I don't know what to do, Kaminari said. There are quirks like mine in my family, but none that powerful. The more powerful, the harder to control. Zuko nodded. Our first course of action is to find a way to keep all this electricity away from that pretty head of yours. He flickered Kaminari's forehead. I have some exercises in mind. Are you free on Thursdays? I guess, Kaminari replied. Great, next Thursday. Meet us at Field Omega after class, Kuzu said. And call Shinso for us, please. He's the last one. All right, it's a date then, Kaminari said, getting up. If you pay for dinner, of course. Kuzu winked, and Kaminari blushed, rushing out of the office. Kuzu laughed, seeing Kaminari running. If he's not ready to be flirted back, he shouldn't try. Shinso Itoshi. As soon as Zuko saw the mop of purple hair on his door, he instantly gestured for the chair. Hello, Shinso-kun, he greeted, pulling the notebook with a purple cat on the cover. Hi, sensei, Shinso replied, but there was something strange with his voice. It seemed strained. Zuko looked up from the notebook and took on Shinso's expression. The kid looked just as neutral as Shouta always is. But unlike Izuku's dad, Shinso doesn't have years of experience as an underground hero to better his poker face. Zuko could see the slightly pained expression on his face and leaned a bit closer to have a better view. Sensei, Shinso said in surprise, leaning back, but Zuko put his hands on his cheeks to stop him. Don't move, Zuko said softly, but he could already feel Kuzu's anger spiking. And honestly, if Zuko could feel anger, he's sure he would be furious right now. How could he not be when he sees the marks on Shinso's face, barely concealed by a poor attempt at makeup, above his nose, on his cheeks, and chin? These scars are more than familiar to Izuku. They saw it many times when Uncle Mike was not wearing his makeup. There's only one thing that can cause it. Muzzle, Zuko said in shock, and Shinso's eyes widened instantly. The kid pulled back from Izuku and covered his face with his hands. Shinso-kun, Kuzu said in silent rage, not directed at the kid. No, he could never get angry at a kid for being hurt. The fury was directed at whoever hurt him. Who did this to you? Shinso-kun, Kuzu said calmly, but he couldn't fool Hitoshi. His sensei was furious at something. Who did this to you? Could this day get any worse? Who is Hitoshi kidding? Of course, it could. That's just how his luck is. Yesterday was such a great day. Hitoshi got to use his hero costume, and he watched from the first row while his sensei traumatized the number 1 hero. He participated in combat training and managed to win against Katsuki Bakugo and Iida. His day had been so good, Hitoshi should have known it wouldn't last. It was when he arrived in his foster house. He will never call that place home that things have started to derail. His foster parents somehow discovered that Hitoshi was not in Gen Ed as they thought, and they were furious. Nothing that Hitoshi didn't expect from them. They shouted and berated, but nothing he wasn't used to hearing. They said, over and over again, how Hitoshi would never be a hero, that he was just a villain, that he stole the place of another child who could be a real hero, that he must have cheated somehow. But then they said they would end this farce, that they would talk to the principal and reveal whatever trickery Hitoshi had used. Hitoshi knew this was impossible, that they couldn't convince the most intelligent creature in the world that Hitoshi had tricked him. But at the time, he was in shock, and because of this, he made his biggest mistake. He spoke. There was only one rule in that place that must never be broken. Hitoshi is never allowed to talk to anyone. Not a word was to come out of his mouth. The moment the first word left his mouth, he felt the fist on his face, and as expected, it bruised. But the punch was not the worst part. The hateful words were not the worst part. The worst part was the muzzle. The punishment for Hitoshi saying anything was to wear that damn muzzle all night. That thing was rusty, too tight, and clearly not made for humans. The result was always the same: cuts on his face that he is forced to try to hide with makeup. Usually, Hitoshi does a good job hiding the marks. But this time, between the bruise, the muzzle on his face, and his usual insomnia, he didn't sleep at all. He was tired, still is, and he must have missed something because of that. Izuku saw it and immediately deduced what caused the injuries. These marks. Shinso, we know what these marks are. And now Kuzu is furious. It's over. Hitoshi will be expelled. He will never be a hero. Shinso-kun, look at me, Zuku called him, gently putting a hand on his chest. Now, try to match breathing. In, out. Great job, keep going. That's it. In, out. It took a few minutes, but eventually, Hitoshi calmed down enough to focus back on the room. Izuku was looking at him worriedly, and he could taste iron in his mouth. He must have bit his lip again. Shinso, Kuzu said, you earned your place in the hero course. You are one of our students, and no one will ever take this from you, okay? If you didn't have potential, Dad would have expelled you on the first day. And if you didn't have the morals, I would have expelled you. He said gently but firmly. You'll be a great hero, Shinso, but you're still a kid. Could you let us help you? Zuko asked. Hitoshi thought about it. For many minutes he kept silent, mulling over it. Could he ask for help? This is duality. They are known for helping people like Hitoshi. He knows they'll try. But what if they fail? Hitoshi's foster parents don't need any more reason to hurt him. He fears what they'll do if they get any. Every single foster home he's been to before was the same. There must be a reason for that, right? Does he even have the right to ask for help? Why you don't understand? He stuttered. It was like his throat was closing. Not a single word came out. Zuko gently held his hands and brought them in front of their face. Would this help? Zuko signed. You sign. Hitoshi signed back. Most underground and Twilight heroes do. Zuko explained. It's good to have a non-verbal way of communicating. And Uncle Mike is practically deaf. And Dad will go deaf soon if he continues to be friends with Mike. Kuzu added. Hitoshi smiled and immediately felt a pain in his face. Right, he still has the bruise from yesterday, and it hurts. Izuku noticed, and it brought them back to their previous talk. What should he tell them? Is it right to tell? If Hitoshi says it, and they really find his foster parents guilty, then what about everyone else? Yes, the other children have also been cruel to Hitoshi. But is it fair to take away their home just because of that? Wouldn't that be selfish? Wouldn't he be acting like a villain? No, he can't do that. He'll be a hero, not a villain. It's not that bad. He signs with his trembling hands. They fear me, but this doesn't happen daily. He tries his best to downplay the situation because it's not that bad, right? This is what everyone ever said to him. They must be right, and it's just with me. They treat the other kids right. It's because they fear my quirk, and I know it's scary. They don't want me to take their free will. I understand that. Shinso-kun, Zuko interrupted him. It's not right. They shouldn't fear you, and they shouldn't hit you, ever. But it was my fault. Hitoshi tried again. I know the rules, and I broke them. I'm not allowed to talk, and I tried to. You're not allowed to talk. Kuzu interrupted again. Shinso, that's horrible. Zuko completed. What else did they do? No, please, I can't say it. Hitoshi was getting desperate. They are cruel, but the other kids shouldn't lose their homes because of me. Their fault, Shinso, not yours. Kuzu replied firmly. No victim blaming here. Their actions will bring them the consequences. You have no fault here. And the other kids won't just lose their homes. Zuko appeased. I don't buy for even a second that they are completely innocent. I know better than most how cruel kids can be. But they'll be relocated to a new, better foster home. At the moment you may be the only one experiencing abuse at their hands. Kuzu said, this is more than enough reason for us to send them to jail. But leaving that aside, what about when another kid like you comes along? What if the lack of consequences makes them bolder and they start abusing other kids? And that is a good point. They are like that with Hitoshi. They will be like that with the next child with a villainous quirk. Duality has a chance to stop them now before it gets out of hand. It looks like Hitoshi will have to take a gamble. Making up his mind, Hitoshi raised his trembling hands and started signing. I don't want to say it. He started. I can't say it. But in my room, hidden in a box under the third bed. No, his bed, because Hitoshi doesn't have a bed. Everything I have is there, including my diary. I wrote everything they did since I got there 3 years ago. When he finished, he finally looked up, and Zuko had a determined look in his eyes. Shinso, thank you for trusting us. You're not going back to that place, he said firmly. I promise you this. Then he got up and gently guided Hitoshi to the door. Hitoshi finally noticed how tired he was feeling after telling someone. He was exhausted, but it was like a weight had been lifted from his back at the same time. It was nice. He silently followed Izuku's lead, and they ended up in the infirmary, where Izuku gestured him to sit down in one of the beds and went on to find recovery girl to treat his face. The old lady came a few seconds later and planted a kiss on Hitoshi's cheek, who immediately felt the pain vanishing, and all his exhaustion crashing into him at the same time. He promptly passed out in the bed, seeing Izuku leaving the room with his phone in hand. Shinso needs help, and there's only one hero that Izuku would trust with this problem. As soon as Izuku saw Shinso sleeping, he excused himself from the infirmary, already calling his dad's number. The purple-haired kid might not know yet, but the moment Izuku saw the muzzle scar on his face, he had already decided this would be his new brother. Izuku, his dad answered, and Izuku heard a few young voices in the background. It seems that he answered in the middle of class. Dad, please tell me you still have your emergency foster license. Zuko immediately asked. All the teachers here have them, except one. His dad confirmed. Metsu always made this clear. Every teacher and pro-hero working at UA must have an emergency foster license. The only exceptions being Izuku because he's still a minor, so he can't get one, and All Might, who doesn't even have a teaching license. It makes Izuku wonder why so many exceptions are being made for the man. It can't be just because he's the #1 hero. Netsu is not this kind of person, rat, bear, or whatever he really is. You get the point. That's great, because I just found my new brother. Kuzu replied to him, and I won't let him go back to that place. He was met by a few seconds of silence, then heard a door closing. All right, where are you? Infirmary. Zuko ignored the muttered, of course you are. I'm coming. How bad it is. One word. Muzzle, Kuzu said, and then they heard only silence followed by hurried steps. Fuck, and if that's not reassuring. His dad rarely swears. ETA 1 minute. Then he hung up. Izuku entered the infirmary and looked down at the bed where Shinso was currently sleeping. Then he eyed the security camera on the wall, knowing Netsu would be watching them right now. Send me everything you have. He signed. I'll burn that place to the ground. Hitoshi woke up to two people talking close to him. The first thing he noticed was that his face wasn't hurting anymore, and he didn't feel as tired anymore. Then he remembered where he was. Izuku brought him to Recovery Girl so she could heal his face. And Hitoshi also told Izuku everything about his foster home. He promised Hitoshi that he would never come back there. Talking about Izuku, one of the voices Hitoshi is hearing is clearly his. The one looks like Aizawa-sensei. Absolutely not. He heard Izuku barking. He's not stepping back into that place for any reason that isn't to get his things. I know, Kuzu. I don't want him there either, Aizawa-sensei replied. Which leaves us with the second option. Sukonku, Izuku completed. No one will be able to deny the accusations if he backs us up. But then Shinsu-kun would have to testify. How long can he push back the interview? It was still Izuku's voice, but the tone changed. If it's not an urgent case, he can wait for a few weeks. Aizawa replied. All right, push it back for as long as you can. I'll keep an eye on that place. Izuku said. I just need a single evidence of what these monsters did. I'll call Tsukachi after school. Aizawa continued. Great, I'll prepare the s'mores. Izuku replied, and Hitoshi could hear the mischief in his voice. But before Aizawa could reply, Izuku was already entering the infirmary again and seeing Hitoshi awake. Shinsu-kun, he cheered and practically jumped at Hitoshi, who was still too sleepy to say which one was that. Let him breathe, problem children, Aizawa said, entering after them. Izuku looked at his dad pouting, and Hitoshi had to look to the side. A pro-hero doesn't have the right to be so cute. He also couldn't help the slight pang of jealousy he felt seeing their interaction. How nice it would be to have something like that. How are you feeling? Izuku asked gently. Hitoshi looked at him and found two blue eyes looking back at him. Like shit, but a bit better. Hitoshi replied. At least my face isn't hurting anymore. That's good. Zuko smiled at him. No one ever smiled at him like that. Do you want to talk now? You can rest more if you want. Hitoshi pondered for a few seconds. It's better to have this talk now. There's no way Hitoshi will be able to rest if he doesn't know what will happen to him. Izuku said he won't have to go back to his foster home. But then, where will he go? Any other foster home will be the same for him. Shinso, Aizawa-sensei called, and Hitoshi's attention immediately went to his sensei. Hitoshi never saw him wearing such a soft expression. You'll be safe now. Hitoshi tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come, so he raised his hands and started signing. What will happen to me now? You'll come with us, Aizawa replied. Zuko next to him, smiling. Hitoshi's eyes widened so much that he felt they could jump out of his face. Going home with his senseis. Are they serious? But for how long? They'll get tired of him sooner or later. Everyone Eventu. A flicker on his forehead brought him back to reality, and he saw a pair of yellow eyes looking at him, firmly but holding the same gentleness as the blue ones. Stop overthinking, Kuzu said. Dad doesn't say things he doesn't mean. It would be illogical to do so. You don't need to worry, Shinsu-kun. Zuko continued. You can stay with us for as long as you want, and if it doesn't work out, we'll find a place where it will. Your safety and happiness are our top priority. And how would Hitoshi not believe? He knows Eraserhead is an entirely logical person. He wouldn't lie to him unless he gains something from it. But there's nothing to gain from lying about this, so it must be true. What time is it? He asked instead. Lunch started a few minutes ago. Zuko replied. How about I go gr? Zuko was interrupted when an alarm started sounding. And Hitoshi saw exactly the moment both he and Aizawa tensed at the sound. Level 3. What the heck? Kuzu said as Aizawa got up. I'll go check. You protect Shinso. Then he ran to the door. Level 3. Hitoshi asked. It means someone unauthorized entered UA. Zuko explained. And by the chaos I'm hearing, soon enough this place will get pretty cramped. Then he turned to Recovery Girl and asked, Granny Chio, will you need help here? Don't worry, dear. You can go ahead and leave. She dismissed. Izuku helped Hitoshi to get up and left with him. Is it safe to leave when there is an intruder? Hitoshi asked, looking around worriedly. Don't worry. The only reason someone would invade would be to either get classified information or attack someone specifically. Kuzu explained. If they want information, they'll go after the teacher's lounge or one of the teacher's offices. And if they are targeting someone, I'm here to protect you. Hitoshi nodded and kept following him. At some point, Izuku stopped to look at their phone and scowled before turning to Hitoshi. Damn vultures. It was just the press, Kuzu said angrily. I'll leave the job of discovering how they got past the UA gates to Nensu. For now, you can take a nap in my office. I have a very comfy couch there. Zuko smiled. Dad said he'll bring lunch there for us. They returned to Izuku's office, where Hitoshi lay on the couch in the corner of the room while Izuku returned to her desk and began writing in the notebook with the purple cat on the cover. Hitoshi tried to sleep, but there was one more thing on his mind that he couldn't stop worrying about. Something that was making him steal glances at Izuku almost every 10 seconds. You can ask whatever you want, Shinso, Zuko said, looking up from his notebook to give him his attention. Hitoshi then decided to just ask. He already said too much. What is one more question? I know Aizawa is fine with me being at his home, but what about you? Hitoshi will be intruding at his home. Is Izuku really fine with that? Of course I am. It was my idea, Zuko replied without an ounce of hesitation. He meant every single word. Oh, Shinso, you have no idea how long I've been asking Dad for a brother, and having you as my brother will be perfect. Perfect? How can you say that? You barely know me, Shinso asked, more harshly than he wanted. But it was the truth. They barely know him. How can they say it'll be perfect? Call it a hunch if you want. Zuko shrugged. I've been a hero for a long time, you know. And one thing I know to trust is my instincts. I'm sure you'll be a great brother, Shinso. The silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. Instead, while Hitoshi mulled over his words, he felt his eyelids getting heavier and sleep catching up with him. But before sleeping, he had one last thing to say. Call me Hitoshi. Then he fell asleep, missing the grin on Izuku's face when he said that. Thankfully, the rest of the day went on without any more drama. Izuku spent the rest of the period working on training plans while Hitoshi slept in his office. The session with Hitoshi was interrupted by the situation with the muzzle, but it's nothing they can't discuss later. After all, the training plan for Hitoshi is already practically complete in his mind, and Izuku has no doubt that his father will want to train Hitoshi personally. May God have mercy on the soul of Izuku's new brother. By the way, who will be the big brother? Izuku quickly pulls out Hitoshi's file and July 1st. Hitoshi is older by just 2 weeks. Damn, Izuku would have liked to be the big brother. But hey, since he's the little brother, he can request piggyback rides, right? This is how it works, right? Well, being the little bro doesn't mean that Izuku will be any less protective of his new brother. No way. If someone tries to mess with Hitoshi, they'd better be fireproof. It is almost time for the last bell, which means that Izuku will have to meet Katsuki, as they said earlier. This meeting is what will make or destroy their relationship once and for all. Better just get it over with. Getting up from his desk, Izuku walks to Hitoshi and gently shakes him. The purple-haired teen wakes with a startle but relaxes when he meets Izuku's eyes, first focusing on the yellow, then on the blue. "How long did I sleep?" he asks, rubbing his eyes. "It's been just a few hours," but his eye bags already look better. "The rest of the period," Zuko replies and raises a hand to stop him from panicking. "Don't worry, Toshi, you needed the rest. I'm sure you can get notes from your classmates about what you lost. And Dad won't let you fall behind the class." "Okay, you're right," Hitoshi says, taking a few breaths to calm himself. Then he registers what Zuko just said and looks up. "Toshi, you don't like it?" Zuko asks worriedly. "I didn't mean to offend you. If you'd like, I can call Somethai this time as Hitoshi," who raises a hand to interrupt him. "It's okay, Zuko," he said, blushing slightly. "I was just surprised. Nobody ever gave me a nickname other than villain." "Well, they are stupid," Zuko replied. "You aren't a villain, Toshi. I feel that I should pay in the same coin. But your name is already kind of a nickname," Hitoshi said, looking at Izuku from up to down. Then he saw his restless posture, practically hopping in place, and smirked. "Bunny, bunny," Zuku's instantly went red. "Why am I a bunny? If you can stop yourself from hopping in place, I can find you another nickname." Hitoshi pointed. "H-O-H-O-H-A. He got you, Zu." Kuzu laughed. "If he's a bunny, what am I? Let me think. An asshole." "This is what you are, Kuzu," Zuko mumbled. "Wow, didn't know bunny could swear," Hitoshi said. "And no one will believe you, ever," Kuzu replied. "He's an even bigger chaos gremlin than me, but no one believes when I say it." Zuko simply turned his head to the side and stuck his tongue out. The intended target was obvious. "Why, Fox, of course," Hitoshi interrupted their bantering. "Fox?" Kuzu asked. "That's pretty fitting, actually. It's perfect. You're just as cunning as one. And sly too," Zuko said. Then they hear the bell ringing. Dismissal time. "Hey, Toshi, we need to take care of some business before we go home. Can you go to the teacher's lounge and tell Dad that we'll be in the usual place?" Zuko asked, not giving much away as to what these businesses are about. "It may take a while, so I'll see you at home, okay?" "Okay, bunny," Hitoshi replied, getting up from the couch. They left the office together, and Izuku walked Hitoshi to the teacher's lounge, then went straight to his classroom. As expected, Katsuki was waiting just outside the classroom, hands in his pocket and his usual scowl on his face. They must have had PE earlier because he's also really sweaty. "Hey, nerd, about fucking time. I thought you wouldn't come," he greeted. Izuku nodded at him. "Follow me," they said and started walking, refusing to elaborate. Katsuki frowned but started following him through the corridors. They walked for about 10 minutes in awkward silence on the Nedzu-approved labyrinth until they got to a big door. It looked like one of the gyms. "Where are we?" Katsuki asked as Izuku pressed a button at the door. A panel opened at the wall, and Izuku made a wait motion for Katsuki, then put his face in the retinal scanner. The door opened, and he gestured for Katsuki to follow him inside. "Welcome to Field Omega," Kuzu said as they entered. "Or, as I like to call it, our personal playground." "What the?" Katsuki said, taking on the place. "This place was a gift from Principal Nedzu after we accepted the teaching assistant position. Every UA employee has something like this," Zuko explained. "Aizawa and his Hell Course, Snipe in the range, 13 in the USJ. Ground Beta is technically all mites. This place has everything we need to test, analyze, and train the most problematic quirks you can imagine." Kuzu continued. "All proof dummies, obstacle course, targets for short and long range, cameras everywhere so I can analyze the footage afterward and from various angles. You got the point." "And why did you bring me here?" Katsuki asked. "To talk, like you wanted," Zuko replied. "This place has cameras, but it's the only place that Nedzu won't be watching unless we ask him to. But first," Izuku went to a closet and threw a change of clothes and a towel to Katsuki. "That should be about your size. The showers are there. Take a shower and then we'll talk." "What?" Katsuki said indignantly. "Are you saying that I stink? You smell like caramel. And we both know it, Katsuki," Kuzu replied. "But this isn't why we are asking for you to take a shower. Just humor us this time, Katsuki," Zuko said. "Please." "Fine," Katsuki huffed, picking up the clothes and going to the shower. As Katsuki went to the shower, Izuku walked through the installation to pass the time. "You really think this will work?" Kuzu asked while they walked. "It's just a theory, but you know it makes sense," Zuko replied. "You always want to see the best in everyone, Zu." Kuzu mused. "I hope you're right. I won't just forgive him if it is, but I'll hate him a little less. Coming from you, that is the equivalent of heavenly forgiveness." Zuko joked. "Shut up, bunny. After you, Fox." Zuko stuck out his tongue. They glared at nothing for a few seconds, then burst into laughter. After that, they waited for Katsuki in comfortable silence. A few minutes later, Katsuki came back with a towel draped on his shoulders. He seemed much calmer than before. The two stopped in front of each other. Izuku said nothing, just letting Katsuki collect his thoughts and decide what he wanted to say. The silence lasted for about 5 minutes, but when it was interrupted, Kuzu almost fell backward in surprise. "I'm sorry," Katsuki said, but the real surprise is that he bowed to Izuku. "I am sorry for how I treated you when we were children, for ruining our friendship, and for what I said the other day. I don't want you dead. I never did." Izuku kept silent for a few seconds, but Katsuki didn't look up at him, only he kept bowing. "Damn it, I hate when you're right, Zu," Kuzu mumbled. "Raise your head, Katsuki. Don't bow to me," he said, and Katsuki got up again, studying Izuku's expression carefully. Then Kuzu unceremoniously sits down on the floor, gesturing him to follow. "First things first," Zuku said. "I forgive you, Katsuki." "You what?" Katsuki asked, confused. "You're too easy, Zu," Kuzu said, then addressed Katsuki. "Well, you never did anything unforgivable, but I'll truly believe you're sorry when you prove it." "That's fair," Katsuki nodded, "and fully intend to prove to you." "Well, we can start by discussing something I noticed," Zuku replied. "While this in no way justifies what you did to me, I think it might not have been completely your fault." "Katsuki, what do you mean?" Katsuki asked. "Do you remember how we were before you got your quirk?" Zuku asked. "You have always been harsh, but you weren't aggressive. That changed right after you got your quirk. We all know how your quirk works," Kuzu continued. "You sweat nitroglycerin and ignite it, causing explosions. But did you know that nitroglycerin is toxic to the human body?" "Of course, I know it," Katsuki replied. "But my body is immune to it." "Not completely," Zuku shook his head. "Your quirk won't kill you, that's true, but your body still recognizes it as a toxin. And when your body is exposed to a toxin, you get stressed, and the stress triggers adrenaline. The adrenaline activates your fight or flight responses. And we both know your default response is fight," Kuzu completed. "The only reason you never knew that is because Aldera quirk counselors must suck." "Quirk counseling was optional," Katsuki replied. "I tried a few times, but I gave up. The only thing they worked on was to make my explosions stronger, and I didn't need their help for this. I didn't want to get my quirk even more volatile. I already hurt someone with it. Then they suck even more than I thought," Kuzu said. "Try thinking about it for a second." Zuku ignored Kuzu's commentary. "How were you feeling before showering? And how are you feeling now?" "I was much more irritable before. I didn't want to talk, because I felt that I would blow if I did," Katsuki explained, then looked at his hands. "You might be right. You took some anger management sessions, right?" Zuku asked. "What? It's all on your file. Just because Dad doesn't read the students' files to avoid bias doesn't mean that I don't either. It's so fucking weird to have a teacher my age." Katsuki groaned. "You'll get used." Kuzu shrugged. "Anyway, back on topic. Anger management. It sucked. The hag tried several, but we couldn't find a single therapist who wasn't more interested in my quirk than my problems," Katsuki explained. "Most of the techniques I use, I found on the internet. The therapists were useless. If you can give me their names later, I will do something about it. Therapy, especially related to children, is a serious business. A therapist should not be prejudiced in any way. And well, as we talked about the other day, Hound Dog is a good option. We can schedule a session for you in a few days. But it's up to you," Kuzu said. "Are you afraid of trying?" "Afraid? I'm not afraid of anything. You can schedule it for the earliest available date. I will prove to you that I can change," Katsuki replied. "I still have much to make up for you. But when I'm done, I hope we can be friends again." "I still hate you," Kuzu said. "But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I am looking forward to it." Zuku smiled. "And welcome back, Kakin." Katsuki's eyes widened as he looked at Izuku. Then he grinned. After that, they parted ways. Checking his phone, there was just a message from his dad. Looks like he went with Hitoshi to his foster house to pick up his things. It'll probably take a few hours for them to get home. Izuku then decided to go home to prepare dinner. They are sure that Shouta and Hitoshi will arrive tired and emotionally drained. Hopefully, Dezawa won't punch anyone. On the way, they passed Nedzu and Majima, examining what is left of the UA barrier. Whatever destroyed the barrier surely is powerful. It was not the work of an acid, nor was it brute force. The barrier has been reduced to, literally, dust. The press has no one with a quirk capable of doing this. So who broke the barrier, and what did they want? Izuku has a bad feeling about this. "Are you sure you want him?" the woman asked for the 10th time since Shouta got there. "And he's been there for less than half an hour, for God's sake." "Calm down, Shouta, don't punch anyone. Don't punch anyone. Don't punch anyone. Don't punch anyone." "Yes, I'm sure I want him," Shouta replied between deep breaths. Since they arrived, Shouta sent Shinso to his room to gather his things, while Shouta went to talk with the foster parents. The moment Shouta showed he was one of UAS teachers, they instantly assumed that Shinso was in trouble and being expelled. They said some concerning things, to say the least. These idiots aren't even trying to hide the abuse. They are sure that everyone will agree with them, and it's infuriating. The last time he felt so much like punching someone was years ago when he saw Izuku handcuffed to that hospital bed, especially because Shouta knows that they are mostly correct. Quirk discrimination is so ingrained that most people see nothing wrong with it, but to the dismay of these idiots, Shouta is not the majority. He has already been through the same thing as Shinso, and he will never let this child go through something like that again. Forget about fostering. Bring the adoption papers yesterday. Just as the woman was about to open her mouth again, probably to ask if Shouta is sure one more time, Shinso opened the door and entered the room. The couple immediately tensed as the kid entered. The look in their eyes is so full of hatred and disgust that Shouta feels seconds of throwing up right here. You got everything? Shouta asked, eyeing how he had only a single bag in a small box, not to mention his school bag that is in Shouta's car. Yes, I go, Shinso started saying, but stopped when he saw his foster father getting up and running with his fist raised. He took a step back, throwing his hands in front of his face to protect himself. But Shouta was faster. He caught the fist and twisted in a painful angle, making the man scream in pain. If you ever raise this hand against a kid like this again, I'll make it so you can never use it again. Shouta spit, full of venom, then shoved the man backward. Let's go, Shinso. The kid nodded, not wanting to risk saying anything, and started following Shouta. Wait, the woman called before Shouta could leave. When Shouta looked, his blood boiled again. You'll want to take this with you. And in her hands was a fucking muzzle. Don't punch anyone, Shouta. Don't punch anyone. Don't punch anyone. Don't punch anyone. I don't need that. But as quirk as she tried arguing but shut her mouth when she saw Shouta's red eyes and floating hair. I know what his quirk is. I'm his homeroom teacher if you already forgot. He snarled. And I'm also a pro hero. You better remember that this place will be investigated for neglect, child abuse, and quirk discrimination. Then he left without sparing her another glance. Shinso pressed a notebook in Shouta's hands as soon as they entered the car. It must be the diary Izuku commented earlier. The drive home was silent. Shouta was still trying to calm down, while Shinso didn't seem to want to say anything. Eventually, Shouta managed to calm down enough to know he wouldn't snap at anyone who didn't deserve it, so he tried to say something. Do you like cats? He tried, and it seemed like it was the right thing to say. Shinso instantly perked up. Do you have cats? He asked hopefully. 2 cats, Pablo and Bastard. Bastard? Your cat's name is Bastard? Shinso asked, holding his laughter. You'll understand when you meet her. Shouta shook his head, focusing back on the road. They didn't talk more until they got to the apartment, but fortunately, the silence wasn't awkward. After parking the car, Shouta guided Shinso to their apartment. Hitoshi was nervous about this. He followed silently after Aizawa, but he couldn't not worry. Aizawa said he didn't do things he didn't mean, but who's to say how long it will take for him to regret fostering Hitoshi like so many others did? Hitoshi can't get attached. It'll only hurt more afterward if he does. Entering the apartment, the first thing Hitoshi noticed was the familiar red shoes at the entrance. A well-known fact was that duality is a false positive, previously believed to be quirkless. When Hitoshi discovered that, his respect for the hero grew even more. Aizawa unceremoniously kicked off his boots and entered. Hitoshi followed after him but took his shoes with a bit more care and left them near Izuku's at the entrance before following. The apartment wasn't anything impressive. Not what anyone would expect from a hero's house, but exactly what anyone would expect from Aizawa. A simple living room with an extremely comfy-looking couch in front of a TV. A cat tower in the corner and not much decoration. The most surprising thing was the many pictures hanging on the walls, mostly in a dark background, probably nighttime. They were mostly pictures of a tired-looking Aizawa and a much shorter Izuku wearing his old skull mask. You can drop your bags anywhere. I'll show you your room after dinner. Bathroom is the third room to the left, Aizawa explained. Then we have my room. Knock on it before entering. Izuku's room. If the sign on the door is green, you can enter. If it's red, knock. My office. I barely use it. And guest room, which from now on will be your room. Kitchen is right there. Hitoshi started hearing a low humming coming from where Aizawa pointed. His curiosity won, and he approached it. He saw Izuku in front of the stove. He was wearing headphones and humming a familiar tune that Hitoshi was trying to recognize. From the wonderful smell, he seems to be making curry. Perched on the counter beside him was a white cat watching everything intently. Hi, Toshi. Izuku greeted him without turning around. He lowered the fire then pressed a button on the headphone before taking them off. Dinner is almost done. Izuku turned around, and Hitoshi saw his blue eyes as he started walking towards Hitoshi. The cat jumped on his shoulder and started eyeing Hitoshi suspiciously. Right, Zuku said, patting the cat. Toshi, this is Pablo, my cat. Pablo. This is Shinso Hitoshi, my new brother. At the word brother, the cat's gaze softened. Hitoshi took a good look at the cat's face. Instantly noticing the scar in his mouth made him look like he was smiling. Whoever did that to a cat, Hitoshi hopes it's burning in hell for it. Carefully, Hitoshi raised his hand and offered to the cat, who hesitated for a second then nuzzled it, mowing softly. I met him less than a minute ago, but I would kill for him, Hitoshi said, not taking his eyes off the cat. He'd kill for you first, Zuko replied, smiling. You're something else, Toshi. It took me weeks for Pablo to let me even get close, let alone touch him. But he already warmed to you. Then he looked at Pablo. Food's ready. Can you get bastard for me? Pablo nodded and jumped off his shoulder, running somewhere, while Zuko turned back and turned off the stove. Then he raised both his hands towards the cabinets, and plates, cups, and cutlery started floating towards the table. How convenient, Hitoshi muttered in awe. I know, right? Zuko giggled. Sit down. I'll call Dad. Hitoshi did as he said and randomly chose a chair, then sat down. A few seconds later, Zuko came back, followed by a yawning Aizawa and Pablo, who was carrying a small black cat in his mouth. This must be bastard. The moment the black cat was put on the floor, she looked at Hitoshi and grinned. Then she ran at him and scratched his feet, making him jump in surprise. Ouch, this is bastard's baptism, Zuko said, laughing. Everyone that enters this house must go through it. Hitoshi looked under the table, and the cat was still there, licking her paws innocently. Is this why you call her bastard? He asked. Oh, Toshi, you didn't see half of it, Kuzu replied. Small tip, if you have anything fragile, never let her enter your room. This is a mistake you only commit once, Zuko muttered sadly. Hitoshi can feel a story here. Maybe he'll ask about it later. Anyway, let's eat before it gets cold, Kuzu said, clapping his hands. Zuko's curry is to die for. It's not that good, Zuko replied sheepishly. You and Daddy can't make anything but coffee. A great coffee, Kuzu said. Agree to disagree, Zuko shrugged. During the entire conversation, Aizawa was practically asleep in his chair. Izuku didn't even bat an eye, simply serving him a plate of curry. He did the same for Hitoshi and only then served himself. Hitoshi tastes the first warm spoonful of curry. Kuzu is right. This is delicious. He felt something strange on his face, his vision blurring slightly, and reached over to check. To his surprise, he felt something moist in his eyes. Tears? Why am I crying? This isn't the first time I have eaten curry. It can't be the taste. I didn't cry after eating lunch rush food. So what is happening with me now? Why do I feel so happy? Izuku and Aizawa were smiling softly, but none of them commented on the tears, despite clearly having noticed them. Hitoshi is more than grateful for that. After dinner, Izuku shows Hitoshi the guest room and promises that they will go out and buy decorations and furniture for the room over the weekend. Frankly, just having a real bed is already more than he could ask for. And he's trying to say this, but Izuku won't budge, and Hitoshi is too exhausted to argue. To his surprise, as soon as he puts his head on the pillow, he falls asleep. First time in weeks that his insomnia has not struck, and the first time in months that he doesn't have nightmares. As soon as Izuku realizes that Hitoshi has slept, they silently leave the room and close the door. They find their father on the couch, grading some papers, probably from class 3A. He said something about them having to write an essay for the laws and ethics class. Izuku unceremoniously throws themselves on the sofa next to him. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was it? Kuzu asked. Shouta stopped his grading and pressed his palms against his eyes. A 7, Shouta replied. Yikes, it's worse than Izuku hopped. Do I want to know? Zuko asked. I'm sure you don't. Shouta shook his head. But I know you will. He picked up a notebook and opened it on a random page. I only read the first page, and I already want to commit murder. Izuku took the notebook and started reading the entry. One of the kids said to the monsters that I talked. Monsters, Zuko wondered. Looks like this is what he calls the foster parents. Shouta replied. The father is the ogre, the mother is the witch. Zuko nodded and continued to read. I didn't talk. I know I'm not allowed to, but they don't believe me. I can't even explain that it's a lie because they don't let me talk and don't know JSL. They muzzled me again. This muzzle hurts so much, it digs on my face like claws, and it's hard to breathe. They said I'll have to wear it the entire weekend. I don't want to. This was one of the first entries, 2 years ago, the date indicates. The page has a few wet spots like he cried while writing. I'm hungry, but the monsters don't let me take off the muzzle, and I can't eat with it. Even without it, they never give me food. I have to sneak and pray for them not to catch me, or else they'll force me to wear the muzzle again. All this just because of my quirk. Why everyone is so afraid of my quirk. I'm not a villain. This already looks bad enough, but to Izuku's despair, it only gets worse. It's been a week since I ate anything. I dreamed of my parents again. They called me a villain and abandoned me. The ogre punched me today. I didn't even do anything. He just entered the room, saw me, and punched me in the face. Why does he hate me that much? The witch made me put my hand on a boiling water pan. Is this fun for her? They started randomly deciding to muzzle me. It doesn't matter, I didn't talk. Not anymore. I overheard the monsters talking earlier. They said a new kid is moving soon. They don't have enough beds, so they'll give my bed to the new kid. Looks like I'll be sleeping on the floor again. They locked me out of the house. I found a sealed sandwich in the school trash can today. First lucky break in months. The following entry surprises Izuku more than he expected. I heard Present Mike's program today. He was interviewing those new heroes, Ifrit and Poltergeist. They said that they don't believe in villainous quirks, that everyone can follow their dreams, no matter what they do. Never let anyone tell you that can't do it. You can do it. They said, I'll be a hero and prove to everyone I'm not a villain. This is my dream. Unfortunately, things didn't get better after that. The witch made me wash the entire kitchen using a toothbrush, my own toothbrush. I never even eat here. Is she running out of ideas? Fuck. Somehow they heard that I'm too applying to UA. I had to lie to them. They think I'm only applying to Gen Ed. They are sure I'll fail. Otherwise, they wouldn't let me try. If they know I'm trying the hero course, I don't even know what they'll do. But I'm sure I won't like it. The ogre punched me again today. Shouldn't they fear me if they are so sure I'm a villain? It makes no sense. If I grow to be a villain, wouldn't it be better for them not to be on a possible revenge list? No, stop. Don't go there, Hitoshi. You're not a villain, and you'll never be. You'll be a hero and prove they are wrong. I can do it. I know I can. Zuko was crying after reading it. Kuzu was boiling in anger. But this is how it has always been for them. Zuko can't offer anger, only tears. Kuzu can't offer tears, only anger. Dad, Kuzu said, closing the diary. That place. I'll burn that place until there's not left. Dad simply sighed and got, gesturing for Izuku to follow him. They followed him to the rooftop of the building. No one needed to say anything. They did that many times. Nobody ever goes up there, so they can spar as much as they want. Perfect for letting out some steam, and at this moment, both Shouta and Kuzu need to. They spar for a few hours, just enough to calm down, and then go to sleep. The next day, Shouta and all of class want to find themselves in front of a bus, ready to leave on a field trip. The class knows that this is for special training, but they don't know exactly what. It's a surprise, after all. Rescue training at USJ. By now it's a tradition every class has to do in their first week. After all, it won't do for future heroes to forget what are their real duty. Heroes are too focused on flashy fights, villains, and hero rankings. But a hero's duty will forever be to protect and save. Shouta admits that he slept through most of the bus ride, ignoring the conversation among the students. Upon arrival at the USJ, the first problem soon appeared in the form of Shouta's #1 source of headache. The idiot All Might has spent all his time going after purse snatchers, and now he won't make it in time for training. Great. As always, 13 gives their speech about how the powerful quirks that could save millions of lives could also be easily used to kill, so the kids must learn to use their quirks carefully and responsibly. Many previous classes used to ignore these concerns, but this class again showed promise. With only a few exceptions, everyone showed that they were thinking seriously about the speech. After that, they go inside. But as they enter, Izuku's phone starts ringing as they enter. Shouta watches as Izuku picks up his cell phone and frowns as he looks at the number before answering. Dabai, you never call. What's happening? Dabai, the vigilante Izuku has been helping. What is happening? Dabai said something on the phone, and Izuku's eyes instantly snapped to the fountain at the center of the building. His frown morphed into a panic expression as he hung the call. Dad, we need to evacuate, Izuku said, pointing to the center. Shouta followed his hand and saw a small swirling purple mass of mist. What is that? Did the training already start? Kirishima asked. The purple mass started growing, stretching from one side of the center all the way to the other, and out of it came several dozens of villains, some that Shouta recognized and others that he didn't. Right in the forefront was a man, early 20s, long, unkempt blue hair, bloodshot red eyes, and the person who was obviously making the portal that the villains were walking out of. Tall, dressed in a bartender suit, seemingly made entirely out of the same purple and black mist that the portal was made out of. But what was really worrying was the creature that followed the blue-haired man. A black humanoid monster with a very muscular body covered in scars. His brain was exposed on the top of his head, his large eyes around it, and a beak-like mouth with an array of sharp teeth. The creature was, for lack of a better word, terrifying. But now it's not the time to worry. Everyone, stay back, Shouta commanded, and everyone fell silent when they heard the tone. This is no training. Those are real villains, he said, falling into a battle instance. No villain will touch his students. For Izuku, receiving a call on his personal phone is already something strange. After all, the only people with his number are Class 1A, the UA staff, and a certain pair of vigilantes. Seeing Dabai's call is even more strange, as he has never called before. Not to mention that he knows about Izuku's work as a teaching assistant. In short, when Izuku answers the phone, he is confused, to say the least. Dabai, you never call, what's happening? Zuko asked as soon as he answered the call. Izuku, finally, I don't know where you are, but you need to act now. The Lee go. The call started cutting USJ any second now. Portal. Hundreds. The call dropped. Izuku's phone was dead. Then something caught Izuku's attention at the center, by the fountain. A small purple mass started to expand quickly. Izuku called his dad as soon as he noticed. "Dad, we need to evacuate," he said, pointing to the mass. Shouta followed his pointing and saw it at the same as the rest of the class. "What is that? Did the training already start?" Kirishima asked. The mass expanded and started looking like a portal. Dozens, maybe hundreds of villains started coming out of it. Some known, others were unknown to Izuku. But the blue-haired man with hands on his body, the Mist Man, and the humanoid creature were clearly the most dangerous of the group. "Everyone, stay back," Dad commanded, the same tone he uses to direct civilians when on duty. "This is no training. Those are real villains," he said, falling into a battle instance. The blue-haired man stepped forward, eyes looking for something. "Where is he? He should be there," the man said, scratching his neck, then looked at the students. "Where is All Might? I can't kill him if he's not there. According to the schedule you stole yesterday, he should be there," the Mist Man said. "Should we leave?" "No. If we kill a few students, I'm sure he'll appear," the blue-haired man replied. This was enough to spring everyone into action. 13. Duality. Protect the students, Dad said, preparing to engage the villains. "Don't you dare die on me, Eraserhead," Kuzu said. "You know me better than that, Ifrit," Eraserhead replied, smiling. "No true hero is a one-trick pony," Ifrit said. "We'll be back. Hang in there." With a single nod, Dad jumped down at the center, capture scarf already in motion. Izuku didn't waste any time, passing the control to Zuku. They took flight and went after the students running for the door. But they stopped in front of the door when a massive purple mist appeared. The Mist Man came from the portal. "I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to let you escape," the Mist Man said. "We are the League of Villains, and we are here to kill All Might." "Okay, but why is he telling them their plan? Are these villains so confident that they will succeed? Or does this Mist guy have other plans? And how do you expect to achieve that when All Might is not even there?" Poltergeist asked, slowly moving to the front of the crowd. "It doesn't matter, I have a job to do, and I'll do it," Mist Man said and started slowly spreading his. "Are those even arms? It all looks like mist." 13 prepared to attack, but Kirishima and Katsuki jumped towards the villain first. "You should consider that you would be beaten by us before you get the chance," Kirishima said behind the smokescreen created by Katsuki's explosion. But as the smoke dispersed, the villain didn't have a single scratch. "How dangerous. I need to remember that even if you are just students, you still are UAS golden eggs. Move away, now," Ifrit commanded, jumping in front of them. "I'm sorry about that, but my job is to scatter you all." The black mist started expanding. "Let's see if you can survive." Then he shot the mist towards the students. Ifrit opened his mouth, throat glowing a bright green, and sent a fire wave towards the villain, but the fire disappeared as soon as it touched the mist. Then, other villains jumped out of the mist and pushed the students before entering again. By the time the mist receded, the only students left were Zero, Sadu, Uraraka, Ashido, Shaoji, and Iida. Physical attacks can't hurt him, and he warped everyone, Poltergeist mumbled. Ifrit could see many portals opening around the building, which means that the students must still be there. But is completely incorporeal, he must have some physical part in his body. He started floating. 13. Evacuate the students. Iida-kun, as soon as you're out, I need you to run to the school and warn the teachers. But it would be a disgrace as the vice class rep to run it. You're not running, Iida, Ifrit said. You are calling for reinforcements, which can be the difference between life and death in this situation. Now, go. Then Poltergeist lunged for the mist guy, concentrating his telekinesis at the air around him. It's much harder to grab things that aren't physical, but it's not impossible. As he attacked, 13 and the students started running for the door. Ifrit saw another portal forming on their way. "Poltergeist, switch," he called, and they switched control. Ifrit shot the grappling hook and used it to dive at high speed, fists already burning a bright blue. And he punched through the portal just as he saw the yellow eyes of the Mist Man, who grunted and receded. Physical attacks don't hurt him, but he's not immune to heat, Poltergeist mumbled. "Switch back." Poltergeist tried pulling on the mist, but it was too unstable to get a feel on it. Not even smoke is that hard to subdue. Glancing behind his back, he saw 13 disintegrating the door and the students leaving. "You're more problematic than we thought," the Mist Man said. "Looks like the students escaped. I must warn Shigaraki Tamura." Then he went through another portal. Seconds before he disappeared, Poltergeist noticed some kind of metal plate attached to the mist. This must be his physical part. But before he could grab on it, the villain disappeared. "Damn it," Ifrit cursed. "We lost him. He said he needed to warn Shigaraki Tamura." Poltergeist replied, "I'll bet my present Mike plushie that this is the handyman's name." "Handyman? Really?" Ifrit snorted. "Is this the best you could think?" "Shut up." Poltergeist blushed. "We need to go help, Dad." Right on, Ifrit replied, and they flew to the center where Eraserhead was engaging the villains. Villains. Of course, they are being attacked by villains on their first week. To make things worse, they were all scattered around. And Hitoshi ended up in the squall zone with the bird boy and the stone boy. This is just Hitoshi's cursed luck again. To make matters worse, he can't help but worry about Eraserhead. He knows that the hero can handle himself. As he said, no hero is a one-trick pony. But still, Hitoshi knows Eraserhead better than most. He is at a complete disadvantage in long battles or against many enemies. Not to mention that creature, whatever that thing was, gave him the chills. Still, most of the villains here are easy to deal with. Tokoyami is taking them almost single-handedly. How can these villains be so confident they can kill All Might when they are being defeated by kids? Hey, Tokoyami, grab one of them for me, Hitoshi asked. Understood, Tokoyami replied, sending Dark Shadow, who quickly grabbed one of the villains. So, want to tell us your plan? Hitoshi asked the villain. Why would I? The villain's face blanked. Let's try again. What is your plan? I don't know, the villain replied. Great, Hitoshi groaned. How the villains plan to kill All Might? The creature has been brought here to fight him. Oh, great. The villains are just cannon fodder. The creature is the real problem. We need to keep going, Hitoshi said. Tokoyami nodded, and Dark Shadow smashed the villain's head on the floor, knocking him out. They can do nothing to help now besides praying for Aizawa and Izuku's safety. Izuku almost choked on air when he got to the center. The creature was pinning Eraserhead to the ground. His arm shouldn't bend like that. And there was blood on the floor. The blue-haired man was talking to the Mist Man. And at the pond not far from there was Isui and Todoroki, also watching the scene. The handyman was talking angrily at the Mist Man. He turned his back to Eraserhead like he wanted to leave. But then he turned to the pond and lunged with his hand outstretched towards Isui. Izuku immediately jumped, but he won't get there on time. The villain closes his hand around Isui's head, and nothing happens. The villain turns back to Eraserhead. You really are cool, Eraserhead. Nomu. The creature raises Eraserhead's head again and prepares to bash on the floor again. But at least Izuku is close enough to that. Before the Nomu could finish, Ifrit was on him, both feet glowing a bright purple, and dropkicks the creature that screams and drops Eraserhead. Then in a quick motion, he shots a chain and pulls the handyman from Isui. Duality, the villain says. So Sensei was right. Both dualities are the same person. Sensei, who's that? Doesn't matter, you'll die here too. Isui, Todoroki, get Eraserhead and run, Ifrit says and lunges towards the villain. Don't let him touch you, Isui warns him, jumping towards Eraserhead. He disintegrated Aizawa Sensei's elbow. Got it, Ifrit replies. He stops right in front of the villain and throws a blazing punch at his gut. Og, you brat, your agility stat is too high. He whines, then tries to grab Izuku, who parries the attack with his arms, avoiding the fingers, and kicks him to the side of the head. The attack makes the hand on his face fall down. No, father. Izuku jumps back as the villain hurries to recover the hand. What the heck? Father, this is the hand of his father. Izuku glances around. It seems like Isui managed to get Eraserhead. And at some point, Katsuki and Kirishima arrive. They are holding the Mist Man. You'll pay for that. Nomu. Izuku turns around, and before he can react, the Nomu is already punching them in the chest with enough force to throw them several meters. They collide against a wall and almost pass out right there. They sure have at least a few broken ribs for that. How is that thing moving? That kick would have killed a normal person, Ifrit says. That thing is obviously not a normal person, Poltergeist replied, forcing himself to get up. He coughs blood. Damn it, I think we have a punctured lung. This will be the problem. I need to breathe. To use fire, Ifrit replied. Let's go, Poltergeist said, choosing to ignore the problem for now. He discards the mask since it's making it harder to breathe and starts floating back to the battle. We need another strategy, Poltergeist says through their shared mind since it's better than talking at this moment. Their kick didn't do anything, so it must have either super regeneration or some kind of shock absorption. Use the arrows, Ifrit suggests. If it has shock absorption, we can try to pierce it. If it has super regeneration, we can try to overwhelm it. Poltergeist nods and opens his cloak, floating the 5 arrows in front of him. He dips the arrows in the flammable solution, then Ifrit puffs a small flame, lighting the arrows. He locates the Nomu, who was about to attack Kirishima, and sends 3 arrows that pierce through his chest and both arms. The Nomu screeches, and Izuku can see him quickly regenerate from the burns. So it really has super regeneration in that case. Poltergeist raises both hands and sends all arrows simultaneously, piercing the creature in multiple places. But he doesn't stop at that. Moving his hands in a series of movements reminiscent of a conductor in an orchestra, the arrows keep circling the creature, constantly piercing it. The damage is consistent but not enough to overwhelm the super regeneration. It's not working, Ifrit comments. Then how about this? Poltergeist throws both grappling hooks at the creature's chest. then uses his telekinesis to wrap the creature on the chains. You can't use your fire like that. But there's plenty of fire for us to use there. Poltergeist spins in place, using the chains to throw the Nomu in the direction of the conflagration zone, then flies after the creature. This creature, who hurt his dad. Izuku doesn't hear when All Might bursts through the door. There's no Zuko and Kuzu. For a moment, they don't feel each other. Izuku feels the anger burning into them. They feel the tears in their eyes, both at the same time. They didn't feel anything like this since their quirk manifested, but now is not the time to think about this. Izuku stops right above the Nomu and kicks him with all his force in the exposed brain, releasing the chains and sending the creature crashing through the ceiling to the floor. But they aren't done yet. Izuku raises both arms, crossing them in front of their chest, and screams, "Hellfire!" and takes control of all the fire in the zone. As the fire starts gathering, they change color to a bright purple and spin like a tornado around the Nomu. Izuku keeps it for at least 5 minutes before releasing it. The fire dies as soon as it's released. The Nomu, or what remained of him, is on the floor. If it can regenerate from this, it'll take some time. Izuku starts coughing blood again and falls to the ground. He passes out before hitting the floor. Zuko is not sure how long it took for him to wake up, but when he does, it's to a heart monitor beeping annoyingly at his ears. He really doesn't need that now, not with the headache he's feeling at this moment. Where is he? And why? Oh, right. Villains attacked the USJ, and they fought that creature. Is everyone all right? 13. The students. Toshi. God, is his dad okay? Zuko practically jumps from the bed before feeling a pain in his chest. He looks around and finds himself in a hospital room. A window reveals that it is already night, but that's not important now. He needs to find his family. Make sure they are safe. Nothing else matters right now. Wow, Izuku, calm down, someone said, putting a hand on his shoulder. Zuko grabs the hand, snapping his head towards the person, and he sees a familiar mop of purple gravity-defying hair. Toshi, he whispers, gently letting go of the hand. Are you okay? Itoshi starts laughing. I'm not the one in a hospital bed, Bunny, he says. Everyone is okay, Zu. The only ones hurt in the attack were you and Aizawa-sensei. He's right there. Hitoshi points to a bed right next to Zuko's, where a person resembling a mummy is lying. He's pretty banged, but the doctors said he won't suffer any permanent damage. Zuko lets out a relieved sigh. Dad is hurt, but he'll be fine. Everyone else is fine too. That's great news. He looks like a mummy, he hears coming from his own mouth. Kuzu, when did you wake up? Zuko asks. 2 minutes ago. Kuzu replies. I was about to try to calm you down when Toshi started talking. Then he turns to Hitoshi. What about the villains? The thugs were mostly caught. Hitoshi explained. The creature was also caught. The mist guy and the hands guy escaped. The heroes arrived not long after you dragged that thing away from the center. Everyone saw the purple tornado. Izuku nods and keeps silent for a few seconds. Hey, Toshi, could you bring me a water cup? Zuko asks. Okay, be right back. Hitoshi replies and leaves the room. As soon as Hitoshi leaves, Kuzu sighs and asks, how can you even breathe like that? Not sure, better not to question. His dad replies. How bad was it really? You died for 2 minutes. Shouter replies, completely serious. The doctors had to perform an urgent surgery. I take it, you didn't tell Toshi. Zuko sighed. Guess it's for the better. Something happened, Dad. What do you mean? Do you remember our tests with our quirk? Zuko asked. Moving fire with my quirk is the most I can do. I can control the heat, but I need to be touching the fire for that. Kuzu complimented. But when we fought the Nomu, we controlled all the fire in the conflagration zone. Kuzu raised his left hand. Zuko raised his right. I think it was only for a few minutes. Zuko continued. But I'm sure I felt anger. We became one again. Kuzu said. I'm sure of it. We'll figure out what happened, Izuku. Shouta assured. I promise you. I know. They replied together. What about the school? We'll have 2 days of break. Shouta explained. So we'll be back Monday. Your only injuries were the broken ribs and punctured lungs, so you should be discharged in the morning. Then we'll go home. I'm sure you won't be discharged just yet, Dad. No, but they can't trap me here. Shouta replied. If his face were visible, Izuku is sure he would be smirking. Sometimes I wonder who is really the kid here. Zuko muttered. I'm back, Toshi said, entering the room with a glass of water, which Zuko graciously floated towards himself. Thanks, Toshi. He smiled, then downed the glass. He hadn't noticed how thirsty he was until now. With Toshi back, Izuku and Shouta dropped the heavy subject since they didn't want to worry the kid. It took some convincing, but eventually, even the insomniac surrendered to exhaustion and fell asleep. The next day, first thing in the morning, Tsukachi entered their room. Nothing surprising, since he probably would want to get Izuku's statement about the incident. The surprising part was seeing a black-haired, scarred man following the detective into the room. Dabai entered without any ceremony. like he wasn't a wanted vigilante, and sat down at the chair in front of Izuku's bed. "Toshi," Izuku called, and the purple-haired boy nodded. "I'll wait outside." Then he left the room. "I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not," Zuko said, eyeing Tsukachi. "Hi, Himi-chan." "Hi, Zuzu," Tsukachi replied in a downright bizarre tone to hear coming from him. "Hi, Eraser-chan." His dad didn't reply. Instead, he kept pretending to be asleep. "As much as I would love to hear how Himi-chan got Tsukunkle's blood, I'm sure you didn't come here to that," Kuzu said. "What do you know? Yesterday, the League approached us again." Dabai started explaining. "They wanted us to help on the attack, but we refused again." Tsukachi's face started melting until a familiar blonde head became visible. "They were so mean. Shigi wouldn't even let me stab anyone." Himiko pouted. "And they didn't let us leave until they were about to attack." Then she transformed back. "As soon as we left, I called you, but it was too late." Dabai sighed. "What the fuck?" They heard coming from the door. Hitoshi was there with another Tsukachi, the real one this time, alternating between the two Tsukachis in the room. "Do you have a twin?" "I can assure you that I don't have a twin," Tsukachi replied. "And I would love to know when you got my blood, Himiko." "Hi, Tsu-chan," Himiko said, dropping the transformation completely. Zuko lifted a finger, throwing his dad's capture weapon around Hitoshi's eyes. "Himi-chan," he said, looking to the ceiling. "Tell me you brought your clothes this time." "Oops," she giggled. "Transform yourself into me, please. I refuse to continue this conversation until you get dressed," Zuko said. "Toshi, I'll explain this later." "All right," Hitoshi said, sounding completely weirded out. "I'll be right there if anyone needs me. Or don't." Then he left again, not even bothering to take the scarf off his eyes. After he left, everyone eyed each other for a few seconds. Then Kuzu shrugged and looked back at Dabai while Himiko transformed into him. Tsukachi mumbled something about needing coffee. "Anyway," Kuzu said, "Tsukunkle, you know these two." Dabai was telling me what he discovered about the League of Villains. Dabai sighed, then resumed his explanation. "Their attack failed, but I'm sure they won't be giving up anytime soon," he said, then pulled a few pictures from his coat. "For now, they only have 3 real members. Shigaraki Tamura is the leader." He pointed to the photo of the blue-haired man from the attack without the hands covering his face. "Kurogiri acts like his caretaker." He pointed to the mist man. "And the last one is the one Shigaraki calls Sensei. But he never showed his face." He points to the picture of a monitor. "I heard him talking to Shigaraki while with them, but he only talks through this monitor." "Oh, and this Sensei is the one that made the Nomu thing." Himiko chirps in. "I heard they saying that it is completely brain-dead and only obeys what Shigi tells it to do. They brought it to fight All Might," Zuko said. "But I don't think super regeneration would be enough to defeat the symbol of peace." "Super regeneration, shock absorption, super strength, and super speed," Dabai corrects. "For someone who was dealing with one of the biggest informants in the underworld, you would imagine that Shigaraki would be careful what he shows me. But no, he bragged non-stop about the thing yesterday. Multiple quirks." Zuko almost jumped. "How is that even possible?" "Damn, All Might. You said he was dead." Tsukachi muttered. "Who's dead?" Kuzu asked. "I need to make a call," Tsukachi said, getting up. "Rest for now, Izuku." Then he went for the door. "You too, Eraser." Shouta only grunted in response. "It's better if we leave too," Dabai said, getting up. "But I have one more thing for you." He pulled one more envelope from his coat and gave it to Izuku. "He'll change location again soon, but there are 2 possible cities that he'll move to next." "Thanks, Dabai." Izuku smiled, but his eyes didn't leave the envelope. A single word was written on it. "Stento, I'll find you soon." Hitoshi is still trying to understand what the hell happened earlier. No one seemed surprised but him. So whoever this girl who had turned into the detective was, they knew her. When he asked Izuku, he simply said she was a friend. Fortunately, this was the only strange event of the day. As Aizawa predicted, Izuku was discharged not long after, with strict guidelines to avoid any kind of physical activity for at least another 3 days. Aizawa should stay in the hospital for at least 1 more day, but after Izuku promised to keep an eye on him, the underground hero was eventually discharged as well. The fact that he threatened to escape through the window also helped. Anyway, they went home, and the rest of the day was spent with them taking a nap on the couch. Pablo hasn't left Izuku's side since they got home. It is more than evident how attached the cat is to the boy. Zuko had neither the motivation nor the condition to cook, so they ended up ordering food for delivery. And after dinner, Izuku decided to gather everyone in the living room to watch a video. Within the first few seconds, Hitoshi already recognized the video. It was the recording of the second day of class when Aizawa basically threatened the symbol of peace. Aizawa had a completely done with everything look on his face. All Might didn't lose his smile, but it was evident that he was cold sweating under the glare. The camera moved towards the teachers, and a few murmurs could be heard in the background. "Young Aizawa, I'm sure they'll be fine." All Might tried to argue. They are hero students. First year's hero students, All Might. Aizawa replied. They're yet to have a single lesson in quirk control and safety measures. You want to randomly throw them to face each other in a closed space, and you're sure they'll be fine. The third years do this exercise, and even so they can't avoid a few accidents, you moron. Young Aiza, call me young Aizawa one more time and I'll break your arm. Aizawa snapped. All Might actually shiver at this. Aizawa, he said carefully. Everything is under control. Aizawa huffed, his expression torn between tired, angry, and completely done. Then he saw the students look directly at the camera, and to everyone's shock, he grinned. Izuku started laughing, and Hitoshi looked at him. It's time for a logical ruse, Kuzu said. Very well. Aizawa addressed the students. You'll follow his plan lesson, since he's so sure it's safe. It'll be All Might started, but Aizawa cut him. And since everything's safe, let's make a compromise, Aizawa said. For every student who has to go to the infirmary, I will break one of your fingers. Yaon Aizawa glared, and All Might chalked on air. Aizawa, isn't this a bit? Everything is safe, right? Aizawa asked but didn't let him answer. Then there's nothing to fear. Carry on with your lesson. I'll be just observing. He went closer and said in the most menacing voice everyone ever heard coming from him. Closely, the video cut a few seconds later. Izuku was wheezing like a tea kettle. Dad, Kuzu said, looking at Aizawa. Never change. You know me, Kuzu. Aizawa grinned. After watching the video, the rest of the afternoon became a movie session. Specifically, Disney and Pixar, after Hitoshi admitted that he had never seen any of their movies, which, according to Zuko, is unacceptable. WALL-E, Finding Nemo, Lion King, Brother Bear. They watched these movies and some others, and Hitoshi reluctantly admits that he loved every one of them. They continued the session until, in the middle of Frozen, Hitoshi fell asleep. The next day he woke up in his bed because of the muzzle problem, followed by the alarm and the attack on the USJ. Izuku and Hitoshi could not have the same discussion Izuku had with the other students, so they decided to have it now since today is Saturday and Izuku can't go back on patrol for at least 2 more days. Shortly after breakfast, Izuku and Hitoshi meet in Izuku's room. Izuku sitting on his bed, the notebook with the purple cat floating in front of his face. Hitoshi sitting right in front of him. All right, Toshi, Zuko started. Let's start with your costume. The inspiration is obvious. After all, it is the same as mine. Dad is incredible, and as expected, simple, practical, functional. I would say, perfect. You didn't ask for any support gear. Why? Kuzu asked. I didn't know what to ask for. Hitoshi replied. Normal. Most first years don't know what to ask for. Statistically speaking, less than 20% finish the course without making some major change in costume or support here, Zuko said, tracing his pencil through the notebook. Then he showed the sketch to Toshi. I can think of 2 items that might help you. First, persona cords. He showed a sketch of a mouth mask. Simply put, this device will disguise your voice and also allow you to imitate other people's voices. But let's leave that one for later, Kuzu said, turning the page. You may have noticed the similarity of this mask to a certain object that I am sure you don't want to use again. So until you have had a few therapy sessions, best to avoid any potential triggers. Therapy? Hitoshi asked. Kuzu closed the notebook and raised an eyebrow at Hitoshi. Yes, therapy, Toshi, Zuko said gently. What you went through, both in your life and at USJ, was something traumatic. Because of the USJ, all students will be required to attend at least 1 session with the hound dog, Kuzu explained. After that it is their choice. But remember one thing, Toshi, therapy does not make you weak, Zuko said. Since Dad adopted us, we go to therapy weekly. It helped us learn to cope with many of our problems. Kuzu continued. You don't have to continue if it doesn't work, but could you at least try? Hitoshi thought for a few seconds, alternating his focus between the blue and the yellow eye. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. Zuko jumped and hugged him. Thanks, Toshi. This is all I ask for. Then he opened the notebook again. On another note, I think you will like this one. He showed a sketch of a capture scarf, the same type as his dad uses. What do you think? A capture scarf? Hitoshi's eyes practically shone under his eye bags. I tried one of these once, but I have 0 talent with this thing, Zuko said. My chains work much better. But you, Toshi, I think you will do well with one of these. I'll ask Dad to help you with it later, Kuzu said. I think he can help you with more than this though. What do you mean? With all due respect, Toshi, but you are a stick with legs, Kuzu replied. I am not saying this to offend you. It is impossible to build muscle mass when you are actively being starved and can't leave the house for anything. It's not your fault and I know how hard you've worked for your chance. But this doesn't change the fact that you will need to stay on the same level as the others. The difference is that we will support you, Zuko continued. We have to develop a training routine for you. Ours isn't viable for you, Kuzu said. Our training is focused on muscle mass, as Zuko takes care of our mobility. But in your case, it's good to keep the muscles at a level that doesn't compromise your mobility. unless you want an All Might physique. Itoshi frowned, and Kuzu started laughing. No, thanks. As expected. Zuko laughed. I would suggest gymnastics or dancing too. It helps with flexibility. I don't think I would be a good dancer. Itoshi replied. I didn't think so either. But nowadays nobody beats me at breakdancing. Kuzu replied. It is especially useful for incorporating kicks into my fighting style. Really? Itoshi asked. Actually, I didn't have any chance to see you really fighting. What is your style? Close quarters. Uncomfortably close. Kuzu replied. In short, I get as close as possible. That way I can stop attacks before they even start. You notice that I'm relatively compact. That's one to put it. Itoshi chuckled. Oh, shut up. Not everyone can be a giant. Kuzu replied. Anyway, that means that most villains have a reach advantage over me. But from the moment I'm in their face, that advantage becomes a disadvantage. It's like using a spear against a sword. If the swordsman gets close enough, the advantage of the spear is completely lost. I think I get it. Itoshi nodded. It works because of our short stature. But it won't work for you, Zuko said. As for what will work for you, Kuzu smirked. I think I have a few ideas, if you're open to try them. Itoshi mimicked the smirk and they started planning. Monday came faster than expected, bringing Shouta and Izuku back to the UA. They were waiting in the teacher's lounge. Although Izuku had to go to the infirmary for a checkup with Recovery Girl before class. If all is well, she will heal the rest of his wounds. As Shouta reviewed his lesson plan for the day, the door opened, revealing the big idiot, All Might, who entered the room in his powered-up form despite everyone there knowing his true form. The clueless buffoon basically didn't notice all the professors staring daggers at him and just walked in, pulling a subject with his usual smile. At their desk, Izuku held one of their notebooks so tightly that the hardcover was beginning to bend. Good morning, everyone, All Might said, going to his desk, where he sat down and deflated. It was a tragedy what happened, but fortunately everyone is fine. Terrible words. Izuku slammed their notebook down hard on the table, got up, and walked over to All Might's desk. Good morning, All Might. Do you mind buffing up for a second? Kuzu said, smiling sweetly. Okay, All Might said, confused but obliged. Why thou? A punching sound echoed in the room. Everyone turned their heads and saw Izuku with their clenched fists slammed at All Might's cheek. Then Shouta noticed the blue eyes. All Might is screwed. Most people fear a lecture from Kuzu, but the one they should fear always has been Zuko. There's something really terrifying in being lectured by someone that can't get angry no matter what. It just means that his arguments will never be clouded by anger. This, in addition to his expression of I'm not angry, just disappointed, never fails to bring guilt even in supervillains. Everyone is fine, you say, Zuko said calmly. Dad almost lost his vision and his quirk. Can you repeat that to his face? He pointed to himself. I died for 2 minutes. Can you repeat that to my face? Asui was almost disintegrated. Can you repeat that to her face? Can you repeat that for all the students who had to fight for their lives much sooner than they should have for the simple fact that you don't take your work seriously? His tone of voice did not change for even a second. Young eyes All Might tried, but Zuko raised a hand to stop him. Then his eyes turned yellow. How is your search for a successor going? All Might, Kuzu asked, and All Might coughed blood. What? The time you spend working has been gradually decreasing. Then, a few years ago, you came to Musutafu and settled here. And now you have become a teacher in the biggest school for heroes in Japan. Your time limit was the only piece I was missing, and after finding out, your plans became obvious. He waved his hand dismissively. So I will ask again, how is your search for a successor going? Did you find any candidates? Well, Izuku slammed his hands on the desk. To hell with the answer. You are a teacher, All Might. The moment you accepted the position, you committed yourself to be a mentor to all the future heroes that will come out of here. You have many enemies, and the moment you accepted this position, all the students gained a target on their backs. So the least you could do is to take your position seriously. Teach the students what it is to be a real hero, if you can even remember what it is, and be here to protect them in case something like this happens again. Then he started leaving the room. I'm going to Recovery Girl. See you in class, Dad. He left massaging his wrist. Damn it, Kuzu. Did you really have to punch so hard? It's like his face is made of steel. Shouta would have found the scene hilarious if he was not also furious with the hero. Still, he managed to feel proud of what his son had just done. Few would have the spine to say something like that to the face of the #1 hero. At least the idiot had the decency to look guilty after hearing the lecture. All Might, please come to my office. Nedzu's voice came from the speaker. If All Might looked ashamed before, now he looks terrified. He gets up and leaves the room looking like a prisoner going to the execution chamber. Serves him right. Shouta is not a vindictive person. I mean, yes, he is. But at least this time, everyone agrees that All Might deserves whatever will happen to him. Jan Kenpo, Izuku yelled, pulling scissors on his left hand and rock on his right. Damn, Zuko mumbled. All right, so let's use my energy. He sat down at one of the infirmary beds, and Recovery Girl kissed his cheek. The pain he was still feeling in his chest dimmed, as did his energy. As Zuko started yawning, Kuzu assumed control. Thanks, Granny, he said, smiling at the old lady. I have no idea how much Nedzu pays you, but it is not enough. Can't say you're wrong, dear. She sighed. I wish Nedzu was a little less paranoid with his staff. I could really use some help here. Maybe you could try. Zuko yawned, scouting some students for a work study. I know healing quirks are rare, but you never know when you'll find someone. Why? He fell asleep. Kuzu chuckled. But I think it's a good idea. Even if there's no one with healing quirks, you might find someone interested in medicine. You bring a good point, Sonny. I'll bring this up with Nedzu at our next meeting, she said, giving Kuzu a few gummies. Now, go on. And don't forget to have your dad come here after class. We need to do 3 more sessions to finish his healing. Yes, ma'am. Kuzu saluted, then left the room. As he approaches the classroom, Izuku soon hears the commotion. Homeroom started 5 minutes ago, and it seems that the room is already making their opinion evident about Shouta being back in his state. Not that Kuzu disagrees with them, but his father is so stubborn that what's the point of even trying? Just before Kuzu opens the door, the sudden silence indicates they have received a Shouta glare, something Kuzu wanted to be inside to see what it looks like with Shouta covered in bandages. A red-eyed mummy is something he had never imagined. Opening the door to the classroom was like opening the gates to the land of chaos. If the students were worried about Shouta, the moment Izuku opened the door, it was as if everyone was holding back from jumping on him. In Dark Shadow's case, he didn't hold back and jumped up to hug Izuku. And there goes another 10 minutes spent calming the students down. Yes, he is fine. No, he doesn't need any more rest time. Recovery Girl has already cleared him. Only then Shouta can explain what happens now. You all did very well with what happened, but the fight is not over yet. And with that, the tension in the class doubled. The sports festival will take place in 1 month, and chaos started again. Is it impossible for this class not to explode after every announcement Shouta makes? Probably. Well, to preserve his dad's eyes, Kuzu decides to test one of Zuku's ideas. He knows that he can spew fire from his entire body, including his eyes. Kuzu puts his hands on the table and does his best imitation of a Shouta glare while concentrating his flames in his eyes. The expected effect is achieved, and everyone immediately becomes quiet. Successful experiment. He smiles and puts his hand in his dad's scarf, where he knows he keeps his eye drops. Letting fire out of your eyes can be intimidating, but drying the water from inside the eyes is not pleasant. Is that how you feel every time you use a razor, Dad? Kuzu says, dripping the eye drops into his eyes. Very unpleasant. You get used to it. Shouta waved him off. No one will address how scary that was. Kaminari asked. I prefer Sensei's glares. All the students nodded in acknowledgement. Back to the sports festival, Shouta said. The school board decided to keep the festival despite the protests of some teachers, myself included. And me, Kuzu replied. But what can we do? To ensure the safety of the students, some precautions will be taken. The festival is being postponed by 2 weeks to give the students more time to prepare. In addition, the usual security will be increased 5-fold. So the only thing you have to worry about is training as much as possible, Shouta explained. Remember, the sports festival is the perfect opportunity to catch the eye of the pro heroes and secure internships. Kuzu said, of course, not everyone will be able to make good impressions, and we also have those who want to go underground. For those, I guarantee that you will also have internship opportunities. But regardless of your plans, go beyond. Plus ultra. The class cheered with him, and the bell signaled the end of homeroom. After that, classes went on as usual. Nothing much happened during the day, which is good. Both the students and the teachers deserve a rest after what they have been through. Apparently, there was some commotion in front of the room at snack time. But if something serious had happened, Toshi would have warned them. Zuko woke up near the last period. After class, Izuku, Shouta, Toshi, and Chiyo go to Field Omega to perform some tests. Well, Toshi is there because he wanted to wait for Izuku and Shouta instead of going home alone. And Granny Chiyo because she is the only one who knows how to operate the mind scanner they need to use. The tests are simple. After calibrating the machine, Zuko does a few simple movements. Kuzu repeats them. Then Zuko does other movements while Kuzu has overall control, and then Kuzu does the same. They have done these tests before. Well, Sonny, nothing has changed since the last scan. Your brain continues the same, Granny said, looking at his brainwaves. Whatever happened, it seems to have been only temporary. That's honestly a relief. Izuku doesn't know what they would do if they were in danger of merging again. Their dual personalities are already so ingrained that they have no desire to become one again. Do you think you can reproduce? Shouta asked them. I can't tell. We don't know what exactly was the trigger, Zuko said. Clearly it had something to do with the villains. I remember that I was furious with that creature for hurting you like that, Kuzu explained. I had forgotten what it was like to feel anger, but seeing you like that was like seeing Mom in that chair again. Except that instead of going into shock, this time I attacked. Zuko said, some kind of trauma response maybe. That is what separated us. Could it measure us again? It makes sense. But how could we possibly test? Kuzu's eyes slid to the kid in the corner of the room, ignoring the conversation for his cell phone. Toshi jumped and looked at them in surprise. He wasn't expecting to be called problem children. Shouta warned. You don't intend to ask him to force you into a PTSD attack, do you? That was the plan, but it didn't seem like Shouta would let them try. Still, this is a perfect moment to test some theories. Don't worry, Kuzu waved as Toshi approached. Hey, Toshi, ever wondered how your quirk would affect someone like us? No, Toshi replied. Then let's try now. Brainwash me, Kuzu said. Also, let's talk about this name later. Okay, Kuzu, righty. Kuzu's eye unfocused. Interesting, Zuko said. So he's under your control, but I'm still fine. Does this mean that your quirk recognizes us as two separate individuals? Then he flicks his own forehead. Huh, neat, Kuzu said as he snapped out of the mind control. Looks like we are your natural counter, Toshi. Well, it is an interesting reaction, but why test this now? Toshi asked. Because we need your help to test something else. Zuko gave a summarized explanation of what happened at the USJ. We want to know if you can force us to do it again. Is it safe? What if you can't split up again? I doubt that this is the case. Kuzu shrugs. If we took that risk, something would have changed the first time. If you are sure. Toshi takes a deep breath. Are you ready? Aye, they say together, and their face instantly blank. It's the second time Zuko feels it. He has so many tests he wants to do. What are the limits of his quirk? What counts as an answer? Would a nonverbal response work? Does a grunt or groan count? What if the person says something, but it is directed at someone else? All right, I'm in control. What do I tell them to do? Toshi looks at Shouta. Keep the command simple. Tell them to merge. Shouta replies without taking his eyes off Izuku. Okay. Toshi turns to the duo again. Zuko, Kuzu, merge. Izuku doesn't move or do any action for a few seconds, which leads Toshi to think it didn't work. But then Chiyo gasps, and when Toshi turns to her, she is watching the device in her hands with full attention. It happens quickly. The moment they hear the command, they both retreat into the depths of their minds. Then Zuko finds himself in a different place, a large empty white room. Automatically, he starts walking, and he sees another person coming toward him, a yellow-eyed Izuku, moving just like him. The two of them stop facing each other, just like looking in a mirror. The two raise their arms and approach each other. The moment their fingers touch, they find themselves back at Field Omega. 1 second, Zuko and Kuzu could sense each other normally. In the next, the constant presence disappeared, but at the same time continued. Izuku knew he was alone, but he didn't feel alone. What a strange feeling. It had been so long since they had felt complete like this. Focusing outside, he notices Shouta and Toshi staring at him with surprised expressions. Toshi pulls out his cell phone and takes a picture of Izuku's face. A few seconds later, Izuku feels his mind being released, and then it is as if something pulls him violently in two opposite directions. The feeling disappears as quickly as it appeared, and Zuko and Kuzu begin to feel each other again. Well, this was something. Kuzu mumbles. Are you okay, Zu? I'm fine, don't worry. Zuko shakes his head, a little disoriented, but nothing serious. Well, Sonny, this was definitely something, Granny Chiyo said, showing them the scanner. Izuku clearly remembers the results the scanner always showed them. Izuku's mind is divided into 3 sectors. The right sector is where Zuko is, the left sector is where Kuzu is, and in the center is like a communal room. The person in control of the body is in the center sector, and both can't be there simultaneously. Izuku constantly has 2 signs active in his mind, representing Zuko and Kuzu. But what Granny Chiyo showed them was different. The moment Toshi gave the command, the 2 signals headed for the central sector of the mind, and as soon as the signals touched, they merged together. When Toshi released their minds, the 2 signs repelled each other back, each to their own sector, which explains the feeling they felt after the separation. Wow, Zuko mumbled. It's like our minds refuse to unite again. But it can be done, Kuzu added. We did at the USJ. And it lasted longer than now. Zuko continued. We will have to practice. We can start trying to go to that place again. It's a good start. Zuko nodded. But of course, this will have to be fitted in between patrols and classes. Starting tomorrow, Izuku starts the after-school training sessions with the students, and they have 1 month to prepare them for the sports festival. Tokoyami is the first, and he has a great darkness to overcome. Tuesday after class, Izuku didn't waste a second. As soon as the class was released, they practically grabbed Tokoyami's arm and dragged him to Field Omega. Call them over-eager if you want, but they have a lot to work on and only 4 weeks until the sports festival. If they can't finish everything by the sports festival, it's not a problem. But after the festival comes the week of internships, and the sports festival is the students' big chance to get the attention of a good hero. Izuku wants to give them the best chance possible. Pleasantries apart, they cut straight to the chase. The first thing Izuku needs is to better understand how Dark Shadow works, and for this, they have some questions prepared. So, Tokoyami-kun, the first thing I need to know is, Zuko started, how many times have you two lost control? And how does it feel when it happens? To a lesser degree, too many times to keep score. Tokoyami explained, but we lost ourselves completely only once. It was horrible, Dark Shadow chirped in. After losing control, we don't remember what happened. I just remember being extremely angry with something. For me, it was as if I had lost consciousness. My vision darkened. I could hear as if I were underwater. When I came to, I only had my surroundings to guess what had happened. Everything was destroyed, and my father passed out in front of me. Tokoyami explained worryingly coldly. Izuku made a note for later and nodded. Okay, and how long does a rampage last? Until some light source stops us, or until I pass out from quirk exhaustion. Whichever happens first, Tokoyami said. The darker, the bigger and stronger Dark Shadow gets, but he uses proportionally more energy. And is he dangerous? Zuko asks, careful with his wording. To you, I mean, I would never hurt, Fumi. Dark Shadow squeaks indignantly. Stop, Dark Shadow. Tokoyami chides the quirk, then turns back to Zuko. He never hurt me physically. The only damage he ever caused me was exhaustion, but it would be wrong to blame him for that. That's good to know. Zuko smiles at them. This means that even when he loses control, Dark Shadow is still loyal to Tokoyami. Maybe he's not as uncontrollable as they seem to think. All right, Tokoyami, we'll need to perform a test here, Kuzu said, exchanging control with Zuko. I want you to let Dark Shadow lose, so we can see how he gets when he loses control. You what? Tokoyami asks worriedly, his eyes widening comically. Kuzu almost starts to laugh, but his concern is to reassure his student. Calm down and look there, Kuzu said, pointing down to a separate room. This is the control room. From inside we can control everything in the training camp, from the dummies to the intensity of the lights. Before starting the training, I need to know what we are dealing with. You won't hurt anyone, Tokoyami-kun. Zuko reassured. We promise you. Tokoyami hesitated for a few more minutes, but eventually he nodded. Zuko beamed and gestured to the locker room. 5 minutes later, Tokoyami was in his PE uniform, and Izuku was in the control room, both ready to start. Okay, Tokoyami. Izuku's voice echoed through the loudspeakers in the gym. Summon the Dark Shadow. We will do it as follows. The cameras were all pointed at him. 10 different monitors showed the room from various angles in the control room, all focused on the Tokoyami. I will dim the lights little by little and try to pinpoint the moment when your control slips. Keep calm and remember, you won't hurt anyone. Tokoyami nodded, and a few seconds later, the Shadow Crow was in front of him. Izuku slowly slid the light level control knob down, paying full attention to the cameras. They observed Dark Shadow's size increasing in proportion to the decrease in light. The growth is apparently exponential rather than linear. But is light really the only factor in his growth? The moment when Dark Shadow's eyes turned red is the moment when Izuku was sure that he was no longer in control. Tokoyami's eyes lost focus as if unconscious, yet he was still standing. A few seconds later, Dark Shadow wrapped itself around Tokoyami like an armor, covering most of his features. Izuku watched for a minute, but neither Tokoyami nor Dark Shadow moved. Interesting. Izuku pressed a button, and from a secret entrance, one of the one-pointers from the entrance exam entered the arena. In a second, a head made of shadows turned toward the robot, and a talon larger than him smashed him to the ground. Interesting. Kuzu cackled, not unlike Netsu, and pressed several other buttons, releasing all sorts of robots, moving dummies and targets into the arena. I think we had too many tea parties with Netsu-san, Zuko muttered. Every robot and dummy that moved was instantly attacked by the quirk, but the immobile targets were not touched except as collateral damage. With each target that appears, Dark Shadow shouts something almost indistinguishable before attacking. But Izuku can pick up a few words like small fry, stay away, hurt, and Fumi. Together these words form an interesting mental picture, to say the least. After about 10 minutes of non-stop attacking, Dark Shadow begins to slow down. His size also decreases slightly, but it doesn't seem to be from exhaustion. Watching more closely, Izuku noticed that he had stopped shouting so loudly, and his attacks seemed much less vicious. He continues to destroy any robot that approaches him, but now he's not attacking everything that moves. While Kuzu watched and commented on what he saw, Zuko quickly wrote everything down in his notebook. Finally, having observed everything he could, Izuku slowly turned the lights back on, noticing that the moment Tokoyami seemed to regain his consciousness, the light was lower than when he lost it. Unlike his usual enthusiasm, Dark Shadow seemed much more tamed. Tokoyami was panting, but otherwise, he just looked confused by all the robot wrecks around him. Zuko excitedly jumped back into the arena to share his remarks. With what he saw here, he has a good theory about the workings of the dark shadow. Well, Tokoyami-kun, I have a good idea what to do now. Zuko grinned, giving Dark Shadow an apple. From what I observed, your quirk works like this. Tell me if this makes sense. He took the notebook and started reading his theory. Dark Shadow absorbs emotions, especially those that Tokoyami rejects. These emotions are strengthened by the darkness. The emotions Tokoyami suppresses the most are anger and fear. These two emotions together cause Dark Shadow to attack everything that moves in a frenzy in an attempt to protect his master from the dangerous and hated enemy. Tokoyami's reason for losing consciousness during the frenzy is mental protection. This way, he is not completely exposed to such high levels of anger that it would overflow onto him. The rejection is unconscious, so neither of them ever noticed, and that is why Tokoyami shows so little emotion all the time. By the end of the explanation, Tokoyami seemed to be in shock, but this is understandable after all he had just discovered. That makes sense, Tokoyami said, exchanging glances with Dark Shadow. You always show the emotions that I lack. Am I stealing your emotions? Dark Shadow asked softly. No, you're not, Kuzu said. You two are kinda like us. The two looked at Kuzu in surprise. We never explained this to the class, Kuzu. Zuko chuckled. Our emotions are separate and shared at the same time. He explained. For example, I'm incapable of feeling anger. So no matter how angry Kuzu is, I am not affected. But shared emotions do affect us when at extreme levels. Kuzu continued. The first time Pablo, our cat, let Zuko pet him, he was so happy that I almost started dancing with him. In your case, you started to suppress your emotions very early, right? Your parents didn't like it very much when you cried, did they? Zuko asked. No, they didn't, Tokoyami confirmed. Even when they were there, Dark Shadow was the one who was always with me. And obviously, his emotional support did not improve in foster care at all. In other words, you have always learned that emotions are unwanted, but a child who represses his emotions will always end up with a breakdown. In your case, it was the first time you lost control. Zuko sighed. Frankly, how can a parent treat their own son this way? Anger and fear. These are the emotions that you suppress the most, Kuzu said. We gathered that from Dark Shadow's reaction during the frenzy. He kept yelling things like small fry, stay away from Fumi, and you won't hurt Fumi. Zuko made his best impression of the shadow bird. Fear and anger together make the Dark Shadow extremely overprotective. Darkness amplifies him in all factors, which includes the emotional. The result, Zuko pointed to the robots, remains scattered. He'll attack anything that moves. That's so much, Tokoyami said, exasperated. What do we do now? First course of action. Therapy, Zuko said. You have practically 15 years of bad habits to undo. You need to learn to accept your emotions. Hound Dog's doors are always open, Kuzu said. But if you prefer, the UA has a list of approved psychologists. They all have their background intensively checked for any hint of discrimination or prejudice. But the final choice will always be yours. Apart from the mandatory session because of the USJ, you only continue if you want to. We will think, Tokoyami said, scratching Dark Shadow's head. If you want to continue with Hound Dog, just talk to him after your session. But if you want to try another psychologist, just talk to Aizawa, and he will give you the list. He also has partial custody of all his students, so he can approve whatever you need, Zuko explained. And finally, at least once a month, I advise you to book one of the gyms and go there to let off steam. You may have noticed that Dark Shadow seems a lot calmer. Letting off some of his pent-up emotions certainly helped him. Tokoyami nodded. Now, back to your training. Kuzu clapped. The best we can do at the moment is to work slowly on your limits. Just as we did today, we will lower the light levels slowly, Zuko explained. We stop when you start to lose control and train like this until you master yourselves. In doing so, we gradually raise your limits until the point where darkness is no longer a problem. What a mad banquet of darkness, Tokoyami muttered under his breath. But he didn't seem opposed to the idea, just a bit reluctant. We also suggest you add a support item to your costume, Kuzu said. You need some backup for an eventual emergency, something that can generate light and calm the Dark Shadow. A simple flashlight would help, but we can be creative with this. And last but not least, you need to train your body, Zuko continued. Your biggest weakness is how much you depend on Dark Shadow. If someone can get past it, you are finished. This part is not our specialty. I will leave this training to Dad. Tokoyami slightly pulled at the mention of Aizawa. A single week and most of the class already feared Shouta that much, and he just had to expel one student. That's a new record. I'll let you know when we can start. After all, Dad will want to train some others. I will probably announce it to the class during homeroom in a week or two. Anyone who is interested and more than welcome to join, but expect at least 4 people along with you. Who will they be? Zuko smirked. Surprise. See. Now, we have another half hour to train, so why don't we start now? Kuzu said. Let's start with the basics. Sit down and concentrate on Dark Shadow and his emotions. Try to feel them and pull them back to you. Focus on the simpler ones first. Under Izuku's direction, Tokoyami spent the rest of the training trying to follow instructions and feel his emotions. They didn't get very far, but any progress is progress. Wednesday was always a highlight of their week. Why, you ask? Simple. Wednesday is tea day with Nenzu-san. This has been a tradition for at least 3 years now, and how could they not love it? Drinking tea, playing chess, practicing analysis, and plotting the demise of their enemies. You know, the usual. Izuku was jumping up and down on their way to the director's office. As usual, as soon as they raise their hand to knock, the door opens by itself. This trick stopped surprising them in the second week, but the principal never stopped using it. To be fair, the only ones who are no longer surprised are Izuku, Aizawa, and Yamada, all former students of the Rat Satan. Izuku enters without much ceremony and sits down in his usual chair right in front of the principal's desk. As usual, a fresh cup of tea awaited him. Jasmine, Zuku's favorite. Good morning, Izuku. The rat greeted cheerfully, then gave his animalistic grin that he avoids showing most people. I'm sure you're eager to get started, so we can skip the pleasantries. He pressed a button under the table, opening a secret compartment with 2 black folders. Absolutely, Kuzu replied with his own grin. His primary inspiration was his dad, but that doesn't mean his grin seems any less intimidating than the principal's. Unfortunately, to continue the flaming garbage can project, we depend on yet another mistake by our target. Not that this is difficult to happen, but that doesn't mean that we can't focus elsewhere for the time being. The first folder, entitled Flaming Trash Can, is the case they have been working on for the last 3 years. Progress was slow, but in those 3 years, they've been gradually undermining the credibility of the number 2 hero, spreading a few rumors, revealing numbers and statistics that the commission tried to hide, a video here and there recorded when the hero thought there was no one. With all their progress, they are just waiting for Endeavor himself to seal his coffin. One more slip is all they need for this. Of course, Endeavor's PR team is not sleeping on the job. They have been extra careful to prevent this from happening. In short, at the moment, they are in a war of attrition. They could end it all right now. Nenzu and Izuku have more than concrete evidence of Endeavor's abuse of his family. All it takes is one statement from Taoya, and it's all over. But if possible, they want to avoid involving the family. They have already suffered too much because of the so-called hero. They don't deserve all the public on their backs, let alone having to deal with the vultures. They will only use this if, by the sports festival, they can't get anything else against Endeavor. The second folder, entitled Project Vigilante, is basically a list of all the known vigilantes who have a chance of being invited to participate in the project. But from the looks of it, Nenzu doesn't intend to work on any of these projects today. Instead, he has put a new folder in front of them. This one is entitled League of Villains. Let's start from the beginning. The principal said, "What do we know about them?" Well, time to analyze. Izuku begins to remember everything he has collected about the villains. The reports from the students and teachers, what Dabai and Himiko revealed, and what they witnessed themselves are enough to shed light on the case. And the conclusion that Izuku comes to is that there is something very strange here. From what we have collected, they have only 3 members. All the rest of the villains were just cannon fodder. Zuku started explaining, already pulling a notebook to write his theories. Their goal was to kill All Might. And to do this they brought a multi-quirk bioengineered weapon made exclusively to fight him. They clearly did not plan things very well, even if we consider that they somehow knew that All Might was weakened and that the creature would be able to kill him. Practically any other hero could beat the creature. It had an exposed brain, Kuzu said, exasperated. 13 could disintegrate the creature in seconds. No super regeneration would save it from that. Snipe would have no problem shooting the brain. Might could literally blow it up. Even I would have no problem continuing to burn it if it hadn't taken me by surprise. And that's the weirdest part, Zuku said thoughtfully. Their plan makes no sense. What do you mean? Nenzu asked. Kurogiri appeared in front of us when we were trying to evacuate the students. Zuku explained. He scattered the students around and tried to stop 13 from escaping. But that's all. He didn't seem to be fighting seriously for even a second. As soon as the students were through the door, he gave up on them instead of giving chase. With his quirk, chasing them would be easy. And then we have Shigaraki. Kuzu continued. He is a walking contradiction. Within minutes he noticed Dad's tell and the timing of his quirk. Most would never notice. This points to high intelligence and a strategic mind. But also, he simply bragged and passed on all the details about the creature to Dabai. The same Dabai who is basically one of the best known informants in the underworld. Zuku said. We were far away so we couldn't hear what he said. But Dad said he constantly used gaming slang. According to him, the terms he used are commonly used in RPGs and strategy games. The fact that their dad is secretly a gamer is a secret that he thinks Izuku doesn't know. He clearly knows who Dabai is. After all, he has approached him a few times trying to get him to join the league. Kuzu sighed. Shigaraki makes no sense. It's like he wanted their plan to fail. And finally, the so-called sensei. Zuko said, whoever they are the key to the mystery. Sukonkel knows something. And apparently so does All Might. But none of them told us anything yet. All we know is that this sensei is someone powerful and influential enough to secretly create a creature with multiple quirks that only moves when ordered to. Kuzu summarized. And that apparently All Might thought he had killed them. Nezu actually shows surprise at this information. Worryingly, nothing surprises the rat. You know something, don't you, Nezu-san? Zuko asked. I know, but I can't share it with you yet. Nezu replied. Sorry, Izuku. Well, this just became more troublesome then. Kuzu sighed, then looked up. It seems that our time is up. We'll try to gather information, but I doubt we will find anything. Be careful, Izuku. If it's really who I think it is, he's dangerous, Nezu warned. Izuku got up and left the room, giving a salutation to the principal, someone dangerous enough that Nezu had to warn him. Well, Izuku definitely won't disregard it. Izuku was strangely quiet. As soon as the last bell rang and the students started to leave, the teaching assistant appeared at the class door and asked Shoto to follow him. But all the way there, he didn't say a single word. Shoto saw his lips moving, so probably both sides of him were having a silent conversation. But about what, Shoto couldn't even imagine. Not that he is trying very hard. He is too busy overthinking what is about to happen. He knows they are going to train. But what kind of training will it be? His only references are his sessions with Endeavor, and frankly, Shoto doesn't know if his ribs can handle something like this today. Since the USJ, Endeavor has gotten even more brutal with his training. The amount of bruises Shoto has when he finishes his training has doubled overnight. He is constantly on the verge of fainting, to the point that Shoto is beginning to fear that he will end up like Taoya. His thoughts are interrupted by a door opening. He enters, following Izuku, who immediately heads for a locker. A few seconds later, he returns with a cold compress and hands it to Shoto. I live with Eraserhead. It is impossible to hide wounds from us, Todoroki-kun, Zuko said, smiling. Just take it, no questions asked. Kuzu continued. Shoto nodded, accepting the compress and pressing it against his chest. The relief was almost instantaneous. He could have done it himself if it wasn't so exhausting to keep his quirk activated constantly. Unceremoniously, Izuku sits down on the floor, crossing his legs, and gestures for Shoto to sit in front of him. Shoto copies him. When he sits down, Izuku already has their notebook in hand. Where did they get it from? Do they have a secondary quirk? Some kind of summoning, maybe? Well, Todoroki-kun, Zuko calls him. I wanted to do some tests with your ice before I started, but seeing the state you are in now, Zuko grits his teeth before continuing. Let's keep things small for now. Shoto opens his mouth to argue but then closes it. He is right. Shoto is in no condition to try anything too taxing at the moment, especially knowing that he will have to train with Endeavor again when he gets home. Let's start with your fire then, Kuzu said, and before Shoto could reply, he raised a hand. Let's just do some simple exercises. I have some theories about your quirk, and I want to test them. Shoto takes a deep breath, then nods. Kuzu smiles at him, then raises his left hand. I didn't always have control over my flames, Kuzu explains with a small green flame dancing in his hand. He places his other hand over the flame and begins to move it as if he were modeling clay. One of the first things I realized is that my emotions affect temperature, especially anger. The first time I used it, I ended up with a second-degree burn on my hand. He opened his hands, and the flame was shaped like a rabbit. It wasn't very serious, but I felt terrible for making Zu suffer yet another burn. Shoto watched the rabbit, surprised at the level of control Kuzu showed. Is it even possible for him to achieve something like that? How? He asked. Lots of practice. Kuzu smirked. Then his expression softened as the rabbit vanished. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Todoroki. Fire is dangerous. It is much easier to safely immobilize someone using your ice than your fire. Just look at your sperm donor. He has the highest capture rate among all the heroes, and the highest property damage rate, and the highest fatality rate, villains, civilians, and other heroes alike. Kuzu sighed. Frankly, he acts like a caveman. Uga, me use hot fire, villain is gone. Then he starts laughing, which makes Shoto laugh too. Oh my god, that was perfect, Shoto says, wheezing. They sober again a few seconds later, and Kuzu goes back to his explanation. He takes off his left glove and shows Shoto his scarred hand, the same he showed the class during the quirk assessment test. That was the last time I completely lost control of my emotions. The scar is a memory of how dangerous my flames are even though I am resistant to them. Imagine what they can do to someone with no resistance, Kuzu explained. Shoto's mind instantly went to Taoya. Shoto was really young when his brother was alive, but he remembers the scars vividly. Before I teach you power, I want you to learn control. If my theories are correct, your level of control can far exceed mine, Kuzu said, raising his index finger and a small flame appeared in it. Try lighting a weak flame, such as a lighter. Shoto nodded and raised his left index finger, but nothing happened. He tried to concentrate more, thinking about the feeling of warmth. But all he could remember was the burns that endeavor had caused him. Instinctively, his hand began to shake until he felt another hand on his. He looked up and saw a pair of blue eyes looking at him with kindness. "It's okay, Todoroki-kun. Remember what we said," Zuko said softly. "Repeat after me. This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass. This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass." Shoto said, "This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass." He repeated as his hand stopped shaking. "This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass. This quirk is mine. And Endeavor can take his opinion and shove it straight up his ass." He kept mentally repeating it and slowly calmed down. Then he tried lighting the flame again. And this time he did it. When he saw the small flame on his finger, he felt much more proud of himself than he had ever felt before. Zuko put his hand above the flame and looked at Shoto, smiling. "Warm," he said. "You see, you are nothing like Endeavor, Todoroki. That man's flames only cause suffering. Yours are warm as an embrace. You just have to learn to use them to protect instead of destroy." "Thank you," Shoto said, watching the small flame on his finger, ignoring the feeling of something wet running down his face. After that, they decided to stop the session here. They still had some time, but Izuku insisted that Shoto go see Recovery Girl before returning home. And Shoto couldn't refuse, not with those concern-filled eyes looking at him. As soon as they were sure that Todoroki was far enough away not to hear them, Kuzu screamed, followed by a full-force punch to the ground. "Fucking Endeavor." He punched the ground again, leaving a fist mark on the soft floor. How can someone like that be a hero? He lifted his fist again, but a hand caught before he could punch again. "You're going to hurt yourself, Kuzu," Zuko said, gently holding his hand. Then he sighed. "I envy you sometimes, Kuzu. I wish I could feel anger for what he did. I have enough anger for both of us." Kuzu replied gently. "You are perfect just like you are, Zu." Zuko smiled, then steeled his expression. "Guess this changes the plan, right?" Zuko said, already pulling his phone. "Oh, you bet," Kuzu replied, dialing Nedzu's number. The rat answered the call quickly, and Kuzu immediately started talking. "Nedzu-san, change of plan. Endeavor needs to fall this weekend, and we already have a plan." On Thursday, Izuku decided to observe the class closely all day. The reason for this is called Kaminari Denki. After reading his file and checking some of his old grades, Izuku saw some suspicious things, to say the least. Kaminari barely passed in subjects such as science and mathematics, but in English and literature his grades were brilliant. His reports on some books were as deeply thought out as Izuku's own quirk analysis. And according to the English tests the students took in the first week, he is practically fluent. In short, Kaminari's notes in some areas are brilliant, while in others, they are abysmal. Izuku wants to observe exactly why. The blonde definitely doesn't seem to be the lazy type. A procrastinator perhaps, but not lazy. Izuku discreetly kept an eye on the blonde man during class, carefully keeping note of his interactions during the lessons. The first class was physics with Snipe. Kaminari, like all the other students, took his notebook to take notes, but the slightest noise seemed to distract him, whether it was someone whispering near him or a fly flying near him. On another note, yes, Sue's frog instincts include eating flies. Half the room was horrified by the scene. Back to Kaminari. Every time something distracted him, it would take him a few minutes to get back to writing his notes, only to be distracted by something else. Out of curiosity, Zuko floated one of his cameras over to watch his notes, and in the entire class, the teenager barely wrote 5 lines in his notebook. When the end of class bell rang, he looked startled, as if he hadn't noticed the time passing. The next class, in English with present Mike, was totally the opposite. Mike's classes are as eclectic as the loud blonde himself. It starts with him rearranging the chairs into a circle to have all the students directly in his line of sight. Most of the examples used in his explanations included everyday situations and many stories about journeys where the language difference caused funny scenes. Any and all conversations among the students were encouraged to be held in English as a form of practice. If anyone had any doubts about terms or expressions, Mike would immediately notice and help. Some students were still taking notes, but most were entirely focused on the explanation. And unlike the previous class, Kaminari was barely distracted during this one, so engaging lessons help him with the distraction problem. Noted, during study hall, Kaminari, along with Kirishima, Ashido, and Shiro, gravitated toward Katsuki, surprisingly forming a study group. Katsuki proved to be an amazingly patient teacher while helping them with mathematics, and despite having difficulty with the subject, Kaminari progressed during the period. Art with Midnight was a middle ground. Not as eclectic as English but much more engaging than physics. Kaminari was distracted a few times during the class but didn't struggle with the subject nearly as much. Finally, ethics and laws, with Eraserhead, seemed to be physically painful for the blonde. By the end of the class, he could barely write 2 lines of notes. It was as if the professor was speaking in an alien language. The essay on the laws of public quirk usage that Aizawa assigned to the next class almost brought him to tears. As everyone was gathering their things to leave at the end of class, Kaminari was slumped on his seat, with his face buried in his arms. Izuku went up to him and gently shook him to get his attention. The blonde practically jumped in fright until he saw Izuku and blushed with embarrassment. Izuku did not comment and asked him to follow. On the way, Kuzu guiding while Zuko discreetly wrote a note, Kaminari filled the silence by talking about a horror movie he watched over the weekend. Something about a guy in a hockey mask who hunted down and killed teenagers at a campground. Upon entering Field Omega, Izuku guides Kaminari into another room with various machines and gestures to a chair. Kaminari nods and sits down while Izuku looks for a specific device. A few seconds later, Izuku places a chair in front of him and sits down with a multimeter in his hand. He hands the wires to Kaminari and asks him to hold them between the fingers of his right hand. This is a multimeter made by Powerloader to keep track of students with electrical quirks. All the data collected goes directly to the servers where I can calmly analyze it later. Zuko explained, I don't know the limits of your quirk, but frankly, from what I've seen, it's dangerously high. Kaminari looked down in shame, but before he could sulk much, Kuzu put a hand on his shoulder. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Kaminari. You have one of the most powerful quirks I've ever seen. If you could already control it completely, I'd be scared. Kuzu said, Kaminari-kun, which do you think is easier, controlling the recoil of a pistol or that of a sniper? Zuko asked. A pistol is much lighter, and the bullets have much less power, Kaminari said. A sniper is heavy, the bullet much stronger, controlling the recoil is much more difficult. Then he smiled. FPS, that's right, Kami. Kuzu smiled. Your power is like a sniper, much more powerful, but much more difficult to control. But once you learn how to work it, you'll be nigh unstoppable. And for that, let's start training. Zuko continued. We have seen how high your voltage can reach, but how low can you go? For example, if I gave you a cable now, could you charge a cell phone? Kuzu asked. Oh, that's easy, Kaminari replied, picking a USB cable on his backpack and sticking it into his mouth, then on his phone. I always do that. Interesting, Kuzu said, then approached the multimeter wires. Open your mouth for a second. He put the wire in Kaminari's mouth and then checked the voltage. 5 volts, no variation. Then he pulled the USB cable and checked again. It didn't change. Can you do it with your hands too? Not quite, Kaminari replied. Last time I tried, I blew my phone. Which leads me to believe that certain parts of your body have a different energy output. The voltage in your mouth is much lower than in the rest of your body, perhaps a protection because it is near the brain. Zuko muttered. All right, hold the wire between your finger and try the lowest output you can get. Kaminari nodded and did as he said. Zuko checked the device. It instantly lit with 20.000 volts that started gradually lowering as Kaminari concentrated on reducing the output until it reached about 1.000 volts and froze it there, varying between 900 and 1.100 volts. Can you say how much you're using? Zuko asked. I would say about 1.000 volts, Kaminari replied. And how do you know that? Kuzu asked curiously. Just a feeling, Kaminari said. I can also estimate the voltage of an outlet or wire just by touching it. So, another part of your quirk, Zuko replied. That's so cool. The human body works with electrical signals. If you train yourself enough to recognize these signals, you will never need to worry about using too little or too much electricity. Kuzu continued. Okay, next test. Izuku ran excitedly into another room and returned with another device, this one full of wires, electrodes. All right, shirt off, Kuzu said, making Kaminari blush. Kuzu, tact. Zuko chided. We need you to put these, he showed the electrodes, so we can see how your electricity runs through your body. All right, Kaminari replied, taking off his blazer and shirt. Kuzu nonchalantly started sticking the electrodes on his chest, over the lungs and heart, in the belly over the stomach, in the arms and forearms, and in different parts of the head. All right, Zuko said, taking a deep breath. I need you to charge your electricity and try to circulate it throughout your body. Keep the voltage as low as possible. We don't want you to short-circuit your brain. Kaminari nodded, and his body started glowing, just like when he used it to make light during the battle training. Soon all of his body was encased in electricity, making his hair stand up because of the static. Zuko kept his eye on the device while Kuzu observed Kaminari glowing. They kept it for about 5 minutes until Zuko deemed to have enough data and told him to stop. As Kaminari got dressed again, Zuko's brain raced a mile a minute, his mouth and hand just as fast as he wrote down and mumbled everything he observed with this quick test. But can you blame him? This quirk is amazing. Kaminari, Zuko called animatedly. Your quirk is incredible. Thanks, Kaminari replied, a little taken aback. Has your quirk counselor discussed with you how it works? Zuko asked, and Kaminari shook his head. Zuko sighed, a bit disappointed. Are they giving anyone a quirk counseling license these days? Then he pointed to a screen that started showing the image of a human body. This is you. Then, the body lightened up. This is you when you activate your quirk. And this means? Kaminari asked. Not sure where this was going. Wait for it, Zuko replied, typing a few things on the keyboard. Then the video reset and slowed down. This time, Kaminari can clearly see the moment the light started from his chest, started traveling all over his body and back to his chest, then repeating. Your quirk basically turns your heart into an electricity generator, Kaminari. The moment you activate it, each heartbeat sends an electric current through your veins, and that's how energy travels through your body. Low voltages are easier to control, so you can concentrate them on just one limb. But when you try a stronger attack, you get out of control. The electricity travels through your veins and literally leaps out of your body. The short circuit happens because a voltage above your limit passes through the brain. Wow, Kaminari looked attentively at the image. Then how do we fix it? Now that we know why and how your quirk works, we work on a way to control it. Kuzu explained. You have managed to reduce the voltage on your hands to about 1.000 volts. The first thing we will do is try to reduce it further. Reduce it? Why? Kaminari asked, tilting his head in confusion. As I said, your output is directly connected to your heart. Zuko explained. This means that in a fight, where your heart will inevitably speed up, your output will inevitably increase as well. Now, what happens if you exceed your limit in the middle of a fight against a villain? Then, Kaminari's eyes widened. My brain short-circuits, and I become vulnerable in the middle of a fight. And then you are dead, or captured and used as a hostage against your allies. Kuzu completed. Let's make sure that never happens, shall we? All right, what do I do? Kaminari asked. To begin with, Zuko started rummaging through a few drawers in the room. Where did I leave them? He pulled out a stack of batteries, each with a different number, the largest of which had a 1000 and the smallest a 100. Each pack had 10 batteries. Training batteries. Hold them between your thumb and forefinger and then run an electric current through them. The number on them is the appropriate power. 10% margin of error. Pass a too high current and the battery will overcharge, but relax, it won't explode. Too low and it will not charge. If you can maintain the right voltage for 5 minutes, it will turn green. Kuzu explained. The goal is simple. Until the sports festival, your minimum output must be 500 volts. When you can fill up 5 batteries in sequence without burning any, you can go to the next one. In addition to control training, I have a suggestion for you. Zuko continued. With an adequate level of control, you could immobilize the majority of villains you meet with a single touch, similar to a taser. But for this, you need to train more in close combat. Of course, this part is Dan's specialty, Kuzu said, smirking when Kaminari paled. As he should, if there is one place Aizawa is ruthless, borderline sadistic, it is in training. And finally, tutoring. Kaminari paled even more at that. Tutoring? He asked. You mean like academically? Zuko sighed. Kaminari, do you know what ADHD is? He asked. ADHD? Kaminari asked. Mom said it isn't real. It's just an excuse. She's wrong. Kuzu huffed. ADHD is a completely real disorder. And from what we observed today, we think you might have it. Of course, to be sure we will have to do a real diagnosis. Zuko explained. I will talk to Granny Chiyo, and if everything goes well, you can undergo the exams tomorrow. But regardless, it is obvious that the teaching methods of most teachers are not working well for you. Kuzu continued. I'm just dumb like that. Kaminari shrugged. Kuzu gave him a karate chop on the head. Nope, he said like he was talking to a child. No self-depreciation here. But, no buts. Zuko interrupted. You are not dumb, Kaminari. Your grades in English and literature are more than enough proof. Nobody is good at everything. Kuzu continued. You struggle with some subjects and have an easy time with others. This is normal for everyone. What matters to us is to help you reach your potential. Zuko said. Yours and everyone else's. Kaminari nodded but said nothing more. He looked quite dumbfounded. Hitoshi was walking home. The distance is only about a 10-minute walk from the UA. Putting it into balance, frankly, walking is better than returning with Aizawa driving. All the respect that Hitoshi has for the hero is not enough to make him want a repeat of the experience. Hitoshi is not suicidal, thank you very much. Anyway, for having love for his own life, he was walking. And because he was walking, he passed the entrance to an alley just in time to hear someone yelling and went to check it out. He found a man with a gun pointed at a tall, scrawny blonde man in the alley. Seriously, somebody give this guy a hamburger. He looks like a scarecrow. And for someone with a gun pointed at him, he was pretty calm, simply trying to reason with the assailant. Watching the scene for a few seconds, Hitoshi tried to talk himself out of it. The right thing to do is find a policeman or hero and ask for help. Hitoshi still doesn't have a license. Shut up and give me everything. The mugger yelled again. I'll shoot. Oh, screw it, he's doing this. I just hope Aizawa or Izuku can bail me out if I lose my spot at the hero course because of what I'm about to do. Hitoshi approaches the mugger silently, forcing himself to remain calm. If he makes a mistake here, someone will get shot. As soon as he gets close enough to make sure that the robber is in range of his quirk, he calls his attention. "Excuse me, mister," he calls. The mugger turns around to look at him but keeps the gun pointed at the scarecrow guy. "Can't you just drop it and leave?" The guy frowns at Hitoshi. "Shut you." Hitoshi smirks as the man's expression blanks. "Got it. Give me the gun, carefully," he orders, and the mugger does as he says. As soon as Hitoshi picks up the gun, he removes the clip, the loaded bullet, and clicks the safety lock. Since it's only one person, Hitoshi can keep control for a few hours as long as no one bumps into him. He picks up his phone and starts calling Izuku. "Hi, Toshi." They answer quickly. "Did something happen?" "Hi, Izuku. Which one am I talking to?" Hitoshi replies. "This is Zuku." Zuku explains. "Kuzu is reviewing our training plan for tomorrow." "Hi, Toshi." Kuzu greets. "Anyway, I doubt you're calling just to hear our voice," Zuku says. "After all, we'll be seeing each other in a few hours." "I wish it was the case," Hitoshi replies. "So I may have just engaged in an act of vigilantism," he explains, and instantly hears Izuku getting up. "Send us your location," Kuzu says. "And don't leave, it'll be worse." Zuku adds. "Did you call the police?" "Not yet, you're the first one I called," Hitoshi explained. "And there's a civilian that was being mugged." "We're coming." Then they dropped the call. Hitoshi instantly sends his location to Izuku's number and turns to keep an eye on the mugger, who hasn't moved since Hitoshi's last command. "Young SH," the man starts, then coughs in his hand. "I mean, young boy, why did you do that?" Hitoshi turns around and sees the skinny man looking at him curiously. Not a hint of fear or disgust, just confusion and curiosity. So Hitoshi deems it safe to answer his question. "He was pointing a gun at you. I couldn't simply do nothing, you know. I want to be a hero." Hitoshi shrugged. "But you used your quirk illegally. Won't that get you in trouble?" The man pointed. "Probably will." Hitoshi sighed. "I'm just hoping they won't expel me. But I don't regret helping someone who needed it, even if it costs your dream," the man said, and Hitoshi nodded slowly. The two were silent for a few seconds. When the silence started to get awkward, Hitoshi opened his mouth to say something. But before he could say anything, the man coughed up blood that splashed onto his suit, and Hitoshi's face, and his mouth. This surprised them both, especially Hitoshi, who frankly didn't expect to end up accidentally drinking the blood of a stranger. But before he could ask if the man was fine, someone dropped down in the alley and made a beeline to Hitoshi. Hitoshi instantly recognized that black cloak. In just a second, Izuku was already fussing over him. "Toshi, are you hurt? Do I need to call an ambulance?" "Oh my god, this is blood. I'm calling an ambulance," Zuku said quickly, and Hitoshi stopped him before he pulled up his phone. "I'm fine, buddy. This blood is not mine." He pointed to the skinny man, and when Zuku saw him, he frowned. "Do they know each other?" Then Zuku turned back to Hitoshi. "What happened? Don't hide anything." Hitoshi knew better than to lie, so he told them exactly what had happened since he left to go home, walking because he has a love for life. He heard a sound coming from the alley, and when he checked, he found a robbery in progress. He considered leaving and looking for a hero but was afraid it would be too late. Then, how he got the mugger's attention caught him with his quirk and disarmed him. "I'm sure there were other ways to deal with the situation," he says, avoiding Izuku's eyes. "I could have attacked by surprise and taken his weapon without using my quirk. But then, a single mistake and someone would have been shot. Using my quirk was the safest way to do things without anyone getting hurt." "Hitoshi, look at me," Kuzu says, and Hitoshi looks at him. "What you did was dangerous and irresponsible. If something had gone wrong, someone could have been killed. Not to mention that vigilantism could cost you your spot on the hero course that you fought so hard to get," Kuzu scolded. Hitoshi looked down as he felt tears gathering in his eyes. Having said that, Hitoshi felt arms around his shoulder. When he looked up, Izuku, one eye each color, was hugging him. "Well done, Toshi." "What?" Hitoshi asked in complete disbelief. "Well done? What does he mean by well done? You knew the risks, and you knew the possible consequences. Yet you risked yourself to save someone else. That's heroism, Toshi," Zuku explained. "We are not supporting vigilantism, don't get it wrong. I really hope it doesn't happen again, but you have done well." Hitoshi nodded, wiping the unshed tears from his eyes, while Izuku took a zip tie from his cloak and used it as a makeshift handcuff to restrain the mugger. "What now?" Hitoshi asked. "I'll take care of it, you go home. If Dad asks about the blood," Izuku pointed to the skeleton man Hitoshi had forgotten was still there. "Just say that you bumped into Yagi-san and he had another accident. This time he doesn't have to know it happened. But if it happens again, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Count about 10 minutes, then let him go, okay?" Hitoshi nodded and left the alley, going back home. Hitoshi knows Aizawa wouldn't expel him over this. But still, after being scolded by Kuzu, he didn't want to be scolded again by an angry Aizawa. Thankfully, he has a brother willing to cover for him this time. As soon as Hitoshi left the alley, Zuko turned to Yagi and stared at him for a few seconds. The blonde looked like he wanted to stick his head in a hole, and Zuko felt Kuzu laughing in the back of his mind. Frankly, he is so petty. Ran out of time again. All Might? Zuko asked, and as the blonde started to sweat cold, he took pity on him and looked away. At least this time, it was because you were in class, he muttered, then asked, what did you think of him? Young Shinso, Yagi asked, and Zuko nodded. He has a good heart and a good head to match. He reminds me a little of young Aizawa. The blonde replied, I think he'll be a good hero. And his quirk? Kuzu asked, raising an eyebrow. It's powerful, and it has a lot of potential. Yagi replied thoughtfully, I'm not going to lie. I'm not the most unbiased person in this world. I underestimated his quirk in the beginning because it wasn't physical. But his victory over the young Bakugo opened my eyes. Then he sighed. You were right, young Izuku. I'm not doing a good job as a teacher, and for that, I'm sorry. He bowed. It's not me you have to apologize to. All Might, Zuko replied. If you want to apologize to your students, start by getting a real teaching license. You can only work as a hero for 3 hours a day. 2.5, actually. All Might replied, and Zuko raised an eyebrow. My time limit is lowering, and fast. This is why I need to find a successor. Well, in the time when you can't work, start taking classes. With effort, you can get a real teaching license in just 2 years. And since you are already working, unlike me, you will already have the necessary experience. Zuko explained, just put the same effort into teaching as you put into heroics. Go beyond, plus ultra. You are right, young Izuku. Thank you, Yagi replied, smiling. This smile was different from his All Might smiles. It seemed a lot more sincere. You're welcome, All Might, Zuko replied. Then after thinking for a few seconds, he gave him a piece of paper. That is my number. If you need help with anything, or just want to talk, just call. All Might nodded, and they went their separate ways. Izuku dragged the mugger who had just come out of Hitoshi's brainwashing to the police station. He seemed honest about wanting to do better, Kuzu said as they walked home. He's All Might, Zuko replied. He's dumb, oblivious, naive, and many other things. But a liar is not one of them. If only good intentions were enough. Kuzu sighed. Arriving there, Izuku quickly dropped off the thief, filled out the report, and left before he could risk running into Tsukachi and having to explain what really happened. As much as he loves his uncle, he definitely doesn't want to have to find a way to bypass lie detection to cover up an act of vigilantism by his brother. Not today. After that, Hitoshi owes him one. Maybe tomorrow, he will ask Toshi to carry him home. It would be a good payment. And despite his short stature, Izuku is much heavier than he looks. After all, his clothes hide well the amount of muscles he has. The next day, classes went normally as expected. After the last bell, Izuku waited at Field Omega since Hitoshi already know where it is. And not even 5 minutes after the bell, Hitoshi was walking in. Izuku had previously registered the biometrics of his 4 students so that they could enter even if he were already there. Izuku soon guided him to the field center, where they had enough space to do the tests. Izuku has 2 goals with this training. The first and most important is to build Hitoshi's self-confidence. Izuku knows firsthand what years of abuse and bullying do to a person. But he also knows that these wounds can be healed. They will leave scars, just like the muzzle marks on Hitoshi's face, but they will stop hurting one day. The second goal is to test and train his quirk. Due to the nature of his quirk, Hitoshi has never had the chance to test what he can and cannot do with it. That changes now. Izuku's brother will have all the support and help he had the chance to have in the past. But the first thing to do is something else. Izuku hands Hitoshi a form that Netsu gave him earlier. A form to change the name of his quirk. Hitoshi takes the form and looks at Izuku with one eyebrow raised. What is that? I have to ask, who named your quirk, Toshi? Zuko asked. My father, right before he gave me away. He went to register my quirk and demanded to call it brainwashing. Hitoshi explained. Fucking quirkists, Kuzu growled. He's an idiot. And if your quirk is brainwashing, I'm the Pope. Brainwashing would cause permanent changes in the person's mind. You can control someone's actions temporarily, but you can't, for example, change their personality. Zuko explained. If I had to suggest a different name, I would say hypnosis or sleepwalking. They both fit what you do. The way the person you control loses consciousness as if he were asleep, and the way your commands make him move is like someone hypnotized or sleepwalking. Wow, this makes sense. Hitoshi replied. I feel like people would fear my quirk much less if it had a different name. No use in dwelling on the past, Kuzu said, even though Zuko could feel he was trying hard to keep his anger in check. It's hard to say if it's good or not that the Shinsos gave Hitoshi away. On the one hand, this added abandonment as one of the traumas that Hitoshi had to go through repeatedly. But on the other hand, if they had kept Hitoshi, the abuse he suffered probably would have come from them. And how much worse could it have been to suffer at the hands of his own parents? The truth is that the only silver lining in this story is the part where Hitoshi was taken out of the abusive environment and now can receive all the love he has always deserved. Shaking his head and focusing back on Hitoshi, Izuku smiles softly as he sees Hitoshi struggling with the name. After thinking for a few minutes, he finally writes a name and gives the formulary back to Izuku. Hypnosis. Is this your final choice? Kuzu asks to make sure. Changing the quirk name a second time would be extremely hard. Yup. Hitoshi nods. It is simple, and I can use it to misguide how it works. Hypnotists hypnotize people in many ways. I can use this to hide my activation requirement. Maybe I should start carrying a pocket watch. Your choice. Zuko laughs. Let's start then. Hitoshi nods. Izuku hands him a list of commands and explains what they will do. Our first test will be about how your commands work. In this list, I have written down several commands that I want you to tell me to do. Kuzu explains. Some commands are things I can easily do but Zuko can't, others are the opposite. There are also commands that include using our quirk. Basically, we want to see how specific your commands can be. First, you hypnotize only me, then only Kuzu, and lastly, both of us at once. Zuko continued. In the future, we will ask ectoplasm to help you find out how many you can hypnotize at once. But for now, let's start. All right. Toshi nodded again. You ready, bunny? Ready when you are, Zuko replied, and then his mind blanked. Hitoshi watched for a few seconds as Zuko's eyes became blank, indicating that he was under his control. Not that he needs this indication, he can sense when someone has been caught in his mind. From there, they followed the list of commands, from the simple ones, close your eyes, clap your hands 3 times, jump on 1 foot, to the more complex ones, dance for 3 minutes, recite the last poem read in Yamada-sensei's class, say step by step how to prepare noodles. And the results were interesting, especially when it came to quirk tests. Every now and then, Kuzu would appear to say something. It's kind of strange to see someone who was previously blank-eyed and irresponsive suddenly get back to normal and start talking out of nowhere. But it is also strange to see someone's eyes constantly changing color and that same person talking to himself. Izuku is strange, and this is normal. The simple commands were all easily accomplished. The commands that included memory varied according to Zuko's memory. Since he wasn't in Yamada's class today, he didn't know the poem, so he kept silent. But when he asked for the step-by-step preparation of noodles, he explained it flawlessly. As for dancing, it depends on the dance. Zuko is skilled in break dancing, so it was easy for him. But being ordered to dance ballet well, disaster is not enough to explain it. At least Hitoshi managed to record some excellent blackmail material for the future. Hitoshi can stimulate memory, but he can't make someone remember something they really forgot. And finally, when it comes to quirks, even under Hitoshi's command, Zuko can't use fire, and Kuzu can't use telekinesis. When controlling both simultaneously, if Hitoshi gives a command without a specific target, the command will be carried out by whoever is most apt to do it. When he asked them to fly to the ceiling and back, Zuko used his telekinesis to do it. But when he asked them to make a complete turn around the field, Kuzu did it. Also, something strange is that his quirk is stronger than he remembers. Hitoshi was sure that he needed an answer to trigger it. But tests now have shown that the smallest verbal response, even a groan, works. Upon receiving a command, the hypnotized person will carry it out exactly as Hitoshi ordered. When he told Izuku to jump as high as possible, Zuko flew and hit his head on the ceiling. He needs to be more specific with the commands to avoid accidents. In a few hours, Hitoshi has learned more about his quirk than he has in his entire life, and he is unsure how to feel about it. He should be happy, but he feels frustrated. He can't help feeling that he should have learned this years ago. At the end of the tests, he releases Izuku, and the two sit down and talk about what they have learned. Hitoshi explains his frustrations about how far behind his colleagues he is, and Izuku assures him that he will quickly catch up with the others. Quickly doesn't feel quick enough, though. In his frustration, Hitoshi clenches his fists and feels as if there is an energy running through his arm, but he dismisses it as being in his head. He barely hears Izuku calling as he punches the ground in frustration. What he hears, however, is the sound of the floor breaking, and what he feels is an absurd pain in his arm. When he looks at his arm, it is completely purple and moving in a way that should not be possible with the existence of bones. Maybe it's the pain, maybe the shock, but all Hitoshi can do is scream, "What the fuck?" Then he passes out. Hitoshi has officially gone insane. It's the only explanation because there's no way he could have suddenly developed a super strength quirk powerful enough to create a crater in the ground and turn his arm into jelly. It was definitely all a dream. He will wake up in his bed at any moment. See, he's waking up. Look, it's his. Wait, this isn't the ceiling of my room. And this isn't my bed. It looks like an infirmary bed. And why is my arm in a cast? Don't tell me it wasn't a dream. As Hitoshi tried to figure out what the hell was going on here, he didn't even notice someone coming in until he had a pair of arms wrapped around him and felt his head hit something that looked like a wall. "Toshi, thank God you're okay." He looked up and saw Zuko hugging him and rambling non-stop. "I didn't know what to do, so I brought you to Recovery Girl as soon as possible. I mean, I know first aid, but your arm was completely broken. Thankfully, Granny Chio hostel Thurasasha treated it on." Hitoshi won't even pretend he got half of what Zuko just said. But he was obviously worried about Hitoshi, so Hitoshi puts his hand on his arm to get his attention. Zuko stops talking immediately and looks at him with watery eyes full of concern. "I'm fine, buddy," he assured. "But I don't know what happened. Actually, how long did I sleep?" 2, maybe 3 hours. Kuzu chimed in. "Between the tests we did earlier and the stamina that Granny Chio used to heal you, you were completely exhausted. Were it not for your constant state of insomnia, I would say that you would have slept at least 8 to 10 hours. Zuko completed. "As for what happened, we were just discussing it when you woke up," Kuzu said. "Would you like to hear it now? Or do you prefer to discuss it tomorrow?" Hitoshi really thought about it for a while. He's still pretty tired, so maybe it's a bad idea. But he really needs to know what happened. Brainwashing. No, scratch that. Hypnosis is a mental and mental-only quirk. It doesn't make any sense that Hitoshi would develop super strength at such a level that he would shatter his own arm. He's not an expert on quirks, but he's pretty sure that's not how they work. Damn, he should leave it until tomorrow. But if he doesn't find out what happened now, he won't be able to sleep. "I want to hear it now," Hitoshi finally said. Kuzu examined his face for a few seconds, looking for something. Then he sighed. "All right," he said. "Can you walk? Here, lean on me." Then he helped Hitoshi get up and supported him on the way to the teacher's lounge. When they entered, Hitoshi saw Principal Nezu, Aizawa, Recovery Girl, and the skeleton guy, Yagi, he thinks, from yesterday. For some reason, Aizawa was giving the skeleton guy a murderous glare. Izuku guided Hitoshi to the sofa and then addressed the rest of the people in the room. "Well, Toshi, you know, Aizawa, Granny Chio, and Principal Nezu," Kuzu said, then pointed to the skeleton guy. "And this is, hello, young Shinso. I'm Yagi Tashinori," he said, getting up from his chair. Then, he inflated. "And I am here." No one will ever make Hitoshi admit that his chin almost hit the ground. The skeleton guy that Hitoshi saved from a mugging yesterday is all fucking might. "All might? You're all might?" Hitoshi asked, looking at every other person in the room. No one else seemed to be surprised, meaning they knew it already. "Wait, did I commit vigilantism and risk losing my place in the hero course to save the #1 hero?" "Vigilantism?" Aizawa asked. Then Hitoshi heard Izuku mouthing a later to him. "Yeah, it's a long story. All might, or should he say, small might," replied with a sheepish smile. "A long story that you'll explain," Aizawa said, then turned to look at Hitoshi. "It has to do with what happened with your quirk today. It's a state secret or something," Zuko said. "So regardless of your decision at the end of it all, what is discussed here stays here." Hitoshi nodded. Then All Might started explaining. And he wasn't kidding. It was a long story. Like, beginning of the quirk age, long. Long story short, 2 brothers, the older one, had possibly the most overpowered quirk in history, being able to give and steal quirks. The younger one was presumably quirkless. The older brother started a war against the world in his attempt to fight against the prejudice that the minority who had quirks suffered in the beginning. And apparently, he was also an overprotective brother, to the point of locking his younger brother in a vault most of his life to protect him. The older brother took pity on his younger brother and gave him a stockpiling quirk, which in turn turned out to reveal that the younger brother was never quirkless as imagined. His quirk alone had no effect, being only a quirk that could be passed on. But with the addition of the stockpiling quirk, it became what is known today as One for All. With his quirk, the younger brother opposes the older one. The two fought, and the younger brother eventually died. But before the confrontation, he passed the quirk on. The second user did the same and died the same way. And so it went on until All Might, the 8th user, fought and won. But not without cost. The victory cost him his stomach and a lung. He can only maintain his muscular form for 2.5 hours a day, which greatly restricts how much heroism he can do in a day. Frankly, how he is even alive is nothing short of a miracle. All Might believed he had killed All for One and was looking for a successor to keep the legacy alive. However, the appearance of the League of Villains, specifically the Nomu thing, indicates that All for One may still be alive. Which brings them to what happened yesterday. All Might was out of time when the mugger approached him, or in other words, defenseless when Hitoshi saved him. Combined with what he said, it made All Might consider him as a possible successor. The thing about One for All is that the quirk can be forcefully given but not taken, and it is passed on by DNA. When All Might accidentally spit blood into Hitoshi's mouth, he accidentally gave the quirk to him. Okay, there is so much here to unpack. So, you want the quirk back? Hitoshi asked. How do I give it back? Not quite, young Shinso, All Might replied. I want to ask you if you would accept to be my successor. And at this moment, Hitoshi might have become Kaminari because his brain short-circuited. Excuse me. Shouta was not happy. Not in the least. First, he got a call from Izuku. His son was desperate because something happened during his training session with Hitoshi. Apparently, Hitoshi's arm simply started glowing, and Hitoshi punched a crater in the ground and shattered his own arm. Now, Shouta is not an analyst like Izuku or Hazashi, but even he knows that quirks don't mutate like that. Hitoshi's quirk is mental. And while some mental quirks eventually develop a physical aspect, Hitoshi's definitely does not fit into this. When he arrived at the infirmary and found Nezu talking to Izuku, he knew that his suspicions were correct. The rat, for the first time since Shouta had met him, did not beat around the bush and immediately told them to go to the teacher's lounge, that what had happened would be explained. Most of the teachers had already left. Shouta was the first to arrive. Along with Izuku, Chiyo came next, and then Nezu, the last to arrive, and Shouta knew he was responsible as soon as he entered, was All Might. Izuku explained what happened, and recognition instantly flashed in All Might's eyes. Although before explaining what happened, the giant spent at least 5 minutes freaking out, saying things like how did this happen, and this shouldn't be possible. When the idiot finally calmed down enough to explain about his quirk, he had to be convinced by the principal that yes, the Aizawas need to know, since they are Shisu's family now. Shouta regretted not bringing his headache pills today. All Might had just started his explanation when Izuku, who apparently left one of his cameras in the infirmary, warned that Hitoshi was waking up and power-walked to find him. A few minutes later, Izuku and Hitoshi entered. Hitoshi seemed fine, tired, but Hitoshi and tired are practically synonymous at this point. Upon seeing his foster, hopefully soon-to-be adopted son, Shouta allowed himself to let out a sigh of relief. The relief didn't last long because shortly after, All Might began to explain exactly what had happened. The fact that the passage of the quirk was an accident that even All Might had no idea was possible was the only thing that kept Shouta from jumping on him and strangling him with his scarf. But then, All Might asked Hitoshi to become his successor, and Shouta almost lost control. And while Hitoshi tried to process what he had just heard, Shouta decided to ask his own questions. Yagi, All Might, who seemed to have forgotten who else was in the room, snapped his head to Shouta and promptly started to sweat. You know what you're asking him, don't you? Aizawa, All Might sputtered. I know this is sudden, but I don't care it's sudden, Yagi. This isn't the problem. Shouta cut him. The problem, All Might, Kuzu complimented, is that you are asking my brother to inherit an immensely self-destructive quirk that comes with the ultimate supervillain as a bonus. Can you even teach him to control the quirk? What would be your advice? Zuko asked. I would say, clench your butt cheeks and yell smash. All Might replied. This is how I do. A few seconds of silence passed, which was interrupted by the sound of a slap. Everyone turned to Zuko, who had face-bombed hard. Should have known, Zuko muttered. All Might, did you have this kind of problem when you received the quirk? No, All Might replied. I could use 100% from the get-go. And that is where the problem lies, Zuko said. You're a genius. There's nothing wrong with that. But geniuses don't understand the difficulty of things that come easy to them. Hitoshi suddenly raised his head and interrupted them. Can you give me some time to think? Of course, my boy, All Might replied, smiling. Ultimately, whether or not Toshi will accept is his choice, Kuzu said. Having said that, Izuku got up and guided Hitoshi out of the room. Shouta wasn't sure where he was guiding him, but Shouta can call him later to know. Let's make a few things clear here, All Might, Shouta said, turning a quirked glare at All Might. Who else knows? My former mentor Gran Torino, Sasaki, and Naomasa, All Might replied. So, Tsukauchi knows about the secret too. Makes sense. He's a good friend of Yagi, and it would be impossible to hide it from him. Fair enough. Let's start with something simple. Whoever Hitoshi wants to tell the secret, he will tell it, Shouta said, raising his hand to interrupt when All Might opened his mouth, probably to argue. I understand how dangerous this Yagi secret is. However, you have a network of people you trust enough to know. Hitoshi will need his. All right, All Might conceded. Second, Shouta continued, even if Hitoshi becomes your successor, he will be his own hero. The path he chooses to follow, you will respect, be it limelight, twilight, rescue, or even underground. This will not be a problem. All Might nodded. Several of the past users were undergrounds. My mentor was Twilight, but she had almost no press presence. When I accepted the quirk, I wanted to become the symbol of peace, but I won't impose this on my successor. I just want to keep the legacy alive. Great, so they are on the same page here. And lastly, if he refuses, you will not try to convince him otherwise. The final decision is his, and you respect it, Shouta said. And if he accepts, I refuse to let him have to deal alone with a 200-year-old supervillain. I know this is out of your control, but we will do everything possible so that he doesn't have to deal with this all for one. On this, we both agree. All Might said firmly. I promised on Nana's grave that I would be the one to end this war once and for all. I may be wounded and limited now, but the promise still stands. My successor will not have the responsibility of dealing with that monster on his shoulders. Shouta nodded at him, satisfied with the answer, despite the two of them not really seeing eye to eye. Despite how much Shouta still thinks he is an idiot, he can admit that as a hero, All Might deserves his respect, if nothing else, for his determination. Waking up early on Sat should be illegal, but unfortunately, it isn't, and Netsu loves to do things on the edge of the law. After the whole situation with One for All had been explained, Shouta still had to patrol that night. He's sure that the rat does it on purpose just to annoy him. The reason for this meeting was not even important. A simple update on the security of the sports festival. A meeting that could have been an email. Sighing, Shouta continued his way through the halls until he reached the familiar door. Placing his hand on the biometric scanner, he heard a beep and the door opened. Immediately the temperature rose, and Shouta felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead. Inside the room, there was molten robot debris everywhere. The short green-haired figure that Shouta loves so much was at the center of it all. Flames danced around him, moving at his signal, attacking each approaching robot and then retreating behind him, accumulating in a shape resembling a snake with several heads. The flames moved like a snake, attacking with each arm movement, and the robot unlucky enough to be in the way was incinerated. Deciding to announce his presence, Shouta activates his quirk, and the multi-headed snake disappears in a cloud of smoke. Noticing his quirk failing, Izuku turns to the entrance. Shouta gets a good look at a pair of green eyes that soon change to the usual blue and yellow. I feel that I should be amazed at how quickly you are learning to control this merging thing, Shouta said, approaching and throwing them a water bottle. But by now, I should be used to it. It just feels natural. Zuko shrugged, taking a sip of the water. Like it should have always been like this. How long can you keep it? 15 to 20 minutes at most, Kuzu replied. More than that, and we start getting headaches like when Zu overuses his quirk. This limit should increase over time, Zuko continued. But for now, this is our maximum. Don't push yourself too hard, Shouta replied. Rest is important too. You're one to talk, mister. I had 2 hours of collective sleep this week, Kuzu teased. Before Shouta could retort, Izuku's cell phone started ringing. Izuku answered the call and began to grin maniacally a few seconds later. Tomorrow, then, Kuzu asked. All right, I'll get everything ready. Then he hung the call. We got him, Zuko said, turning to leave the room. Shouta went after him as the cleaning bot started entering the arena. Whatever this is about, who is he kidding? Only one person, or rat, can make his son grin like that. Someone is completely screwed. Crazy, not crazy. Hey, Dabai. Burning down the house. Duality. Crazy, not crazy. So dry. You make it seem like you aren't happy to hear from me. Burning down the house. Maybe because I'm not. Every time you text me, it's to give me more trouble. Crazy, not crazy. Oh, I'm sure you'll want a part on this one. I have here a couple of tickets to the arrest of a certain flaming trash can. Interested? Burning down the house. What? You got him? Crazy, not crazy. He can't escape that one. Let's sweeten the deal. You come with us tomorrow, and I'll let you personally put the cuffs on him. Burning down the house. And the catch. Crazy, not crazy. The other Todorokis will be there as well. Look, I will not force you to talk to them or reveal your identity, but they will see you. And although I don't know if Shouta will recognize you, the others probably will. Burning down the house. Can I bring Himiko? Crazy, not crazy. She would come even if I said she couldn't. But tell her that if she stabs anyone, I will confiscate all her knives. Burning down the house. Fine, I'm in. I can't run forever. Might as well deal with this now. Anxiety and anticipation. These two words sum up perfectly how Dabai was feeling at that moment. Both feelings only increase as the car he is in turns the corner, and the Todoroki's residence comes into his view. In the car's back seat, Himiko was playing with a knife, doing various stunts that should not be done in a moving car. Izuku was in the passenger seat, watching the scenery go by with a casual smile on his face, and Aizawa, driving like the crazy driver he is. How someone who has driven through 15 stoplights and almost ran over someone 7 times in less than 3 miles has a driver's license is one of the great mysteries of this world. Ironically, when he saw a cat in the street, he stopped the car and waited for it to pass. Finally, they parked in front of the classic Japanese-style house. Looking around, Dabai noticed several plainclothes policemen positioned in other cars on the street. Tsukachi, who wouldn't let go of his overcoat and hat for the world, was on the other side of the street with. Was that Netsu? Izuku said the principal was part of this case, but Dabai didn't think he would be present at the arrest. And along with them were, Dabai's heart leaped when he saw them, the 3 Todoroki siblings. Fayumi and Natsuo have not changed so much from what he remembered. But Shouto did. Not only in height, but his posture was also different than he remembered. Dabai's hands began to shake at the thought of talking to them. Won't they hate him for abandoning them? as much as he had spent years trying to convince himself that he no longer cared about his old family. He never could. He still cares for them, and he doesn't know what he will do if they reject him. And after all this time, does he even have the right to be Taoya again? What if? Stop overthinking, Dabai. He heard it at the same time as he felt a hand squeezing his. Then he felt something sharp poke him in the rib. Or I'll stab you. Dabai chuckled at it. Only Himiko can take a reassurance and turn it into a threat. You want to talk to them now? Zuko asked, turning that blue eyes at him. No, let's deal with the old man first. Dabai replied. As you wish, Kuzu said, giving Dabai a pair of quirk-suppressing handcuffs. Then he glanced at his phone. Endeavor suspects nothing. He doesn't care enough to realize that Natsuo and Fayumi are gone. And he thinks Shoto is at UA for extra training. All right, it's showtime, he said, slipping to his Dabai persona. Showtime. Kuzu grinned at him. Go on, Dabai-chan. Himiko pushed him towards the entrance. Izuku, Dabai, and Aizawa walked toward the front door. Izuku grabbed a sheet of paper from somewhere, probably the same place where he keeps his notebook, and then rang the bell. A few seconds passed before they heard the door being opened, and here was the man of the house. As always with his flaming mustache, if someone had said he slept like that, Dabai would probably have believed them. Endeavor looked confused at the three men standing in his doorway. He knew Aizawa and Izuku but did not seem to recognize Dabai. Before he could say anything, Aizawa activated his quirk, wiping that ridiculous mustache off his face, and Izuku began to read the sheet in his hands. Todoroki Enji, you are under arrest for the crimes of corruption, abuse of power, multiple homicides, whether intentional or not, quirk marriage, domestic abuse, and child abuse, Izuku explained. But what are you talking? The moment Endeavor raised his arm toward Izuku, Dabai, with immense satisfaction, slapped the cuffs on him. Izuku ignored him and continued reading the sheet. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. The Miranda warning. Dabai is sure this isn't used in Japan. Is Izuku just playing with him? What a piece of crap this is. Let me go immediately, Endeavor demanded. No, I don't think I will, Izuku replied, smirking at the man. You have gone unpunished for too long. Time to face the consequences of your actions, Endeavor. It won't stay like that. I am the number 2 hero, Endeavor replied. Oh, how cute. He still thinks his position will save him. Izuku grinned at Dabai. Then his smile vanished, and he pinned Endeavor with a glare. Do you really think that the commission will continue to cover for you? Do you think they wouldn't throw you under the bus to save face? Well, they may try, but this time it will be impossible. Even they cannot deny evidence backed up by the Truth Squad, especially when you have someone who has come back from the dead just to testify against you. Endeavor's eyes widened at this. It's over, old man, Dabai said with a lazy smirk. You lost. Endeavor stared at Dabai for a few seconds until recognition flashed in his eyes that widened so much that Dabai thought they would jump out of the sockets. Taoya, he asked. This me, Dad. Dabai asked. What am I talking about? Of course, you didn't. Endeavor opened and closed his mouth several times, looking like a fish out of water. After trying to say something for a few seconds, he just shook his head and followed Aizawa silently towards the police car at the end of the street. They could have stopped the car in front of the house, but no one wanted to miss the chance to have Endeavor do a walk of shame in handcuffs. Surprisingly, Endeavor got into the police van without much fuss. Maybe it was the shock of seeing his supposedly dead son in front of him. But regardless, he was put in the police van and taken out of there. Aizawa went along with the police, and Izuku stayed behind, probably to stay with Dabai. Turning again to where the other Todorokis were, his eyes met Fayumi's, and she gasped. Dabai took a deep breath and started walking toward them. Time to face the past. Looking through the car's mirror, Shouta saw Enji, who refused to look up. Shouta has been a hero for several years, and even before that, in all his life, he had never seen Endeavor act so subdued. What happens now? Endeavor asked, still not looking up. Shouta thought for a few seconds. It depends on the judge's decision. He explained, Natsuo and Fayumi are already of age, so they can live independently if they choose. As for Shouto, he has 3 possibilities. If Todoroki Rei is declared stable and he wants to live with her, she will have custody of him. Otherwise, he can choose between Taoya or becoming a UA ward. Technically speaking, the second and third options are basically the same. When everything is resolved, and Taoya is properly declared to be alive, he will be placed in Project Vigilante as Izuku and will become an UA ward. If Shouto wants to live with him or become an UA ward as well, he will live at the school anyway. As for you, frankly, despite all your crimes, your sentence will end up being very short, 25 years at most. Unfortunately, most of his crimes can be justified as accidents. After all, he is a hero with a highly destructive quirk. The commission will try to cover it up as much as possible. They don't want the public to know why you are being arrested. But one thing is certain, Endeavor. You will never get your license back. Shouta smirked and stared at him through the mirror. "He will never be the #1 hero." Endeavor did not answer, but Shouta saw him clenching his fists on his knees. Shouta's smile widened at this. Let him suffer. Petty, he knows, but he never denied that he was. And in this case, it is more than justified. After all, this man abused one of his children for years. Not that he will admit to anyone that he sees them that way. But all his students are his children. Izuku kept their distance while Dabai talked to his family. They and Himiko were close enough to intervene if something went wrong, but far enough away to give them privacy. Tsukachi and Nedzu walked away for the same reason. Fortunately, their concern was unnecessary. Izuku watched Dabai approach the Todorokis with a shy smile on his face. He said something, and the three of them froze, but it wasn't bad. Fayumi covered her mouth as she tried to hold back her tears. Natsuo was a little less shy and immediately tackled him in a hug. Shouta literally froze. A trail of ice appeared beneath his feet, but the hesitation did not last long. In a few seconds, the four siblings were in a group hug. Izuku smiled and, placing his hand on Himiko's shoulder, guided her away from there to give them the privacy they needed. They have a lot to discuss, but Izuku knows they will be fine. The week that followed was, to sum it up in one word, chaotic. The Endeavor trial was extremely rushed by both Nedzu and the HPSC, which tried its best to keep the case out of the press. This caused the trial to begin the very next day. The trial lasted 3 days, not because it was a difficult decision, but because of the number of witnesses brought to testify against Endeavor. Most of them were civilians who lost their property or loved ones as collateral damage from the actions of the hero. On the last day, all the Todorokis were also called to witness. One by one, they told of their experiences with their father's neglect and abuse. The last to testify was Taoya, who told everyone about his experience with Endeavor's training that led to his supposed death. All statements were made in the presence of Mr. Truth and with Tsukachi present in the room, which was enough to validate each of them. Endeavor's sentence was decided to be 25 years in Tartarus, where he will have to undergo weekly anger management therapy sessions. He will have a chance for parole in 15 years in case of good behavior. However, he will never get his Pro Hero license back, regardless of what happens. Endeavor is officially retired. With the sentence given, the HPSC had no way to hide it anymore. So they did exactly what Izuku predicted they would do and threw all the blame on Endeavor to save face. The speech made to the media was that they had been investigating the former hero and found out about his crimes. The HPSC will not tolerate this kind of behavior and blah blah blah. Baloney, but their turn will come one day. Because of what happened, Shouto Todoroki was given a week's leave from school, in which he and his siblings were finally reunited and reconciled with their mother. After the examinations were done, Rei was deemed stable enough to leave the mental institute. However, she did not consider herself fit enough to regain custody of Shouto. After a family discussion, it was decided that Shouto would live in the UA together with Taoya, who would become his legal guardian. Taoya and Himiko have finally agreed to join Project Vigilante. Taoya will be mentored by Present Mike. With Himiko, it was a little more complicated. Because of her quirk and acting skills, Himiko wanted to go into underground with a focus on undercover missions, which is not a problem. Izuku was only forced to be Limelight because he was the first participant in the project, so he ended up being the face of the project. But at the same time that she demonstrated extreme skill as an underground, Himiko also showed a quick mind and analytical skills far above average. She also showed great interest in the support area. Ultimately, Himiko will have a dual mentorship. Her mentors will be Aizawa for underground and Majima for support and analysis. The two will live at UA as school wards. Despite having lived on the street, Taoya has kept up with his studies, having graduated online. As such, he will only be part of Class 1 and Heroics classes. On the other hand, Himiko will be enrolled in the class in Minda's place despite being a year older than the rest of the class. Class 1 accepted their new classmate easily, especially after it was explained that Himiko would be part of the same project that trained Izuku. And Himiko almost immediately assumed the role of class big sister, the crazy big sister who will stab anyone who gets out of line. But still, the weeks until the sports festival went by quickly, and Izuku couldn't be prouder of the students' progress. Aoyama and Hagakure began quirk counseling with Yamada, who specializes in hard-to-control quirks. Aizawa started an extra class in quirkless fighting, open to anyone interested. Tokoyami, Kaminari, Todoroki, and Hitoshi all decided to join. And speaking of Izuku's personal students, their progress has also been incredible. Their control is still far from perfect, but it's much better than it was a few weeks ago. It's been 3 heroic classes since Kaminari last fried his brain. Tokoyami has shown more emotion, and Dark Shadow has become much less agitated since they started therapy. Todoroki has begun to tentatively use his fire in training, and Hitoshi. Taking into account that he now has not only one but 2 quirks to master, we can say that his progress is the most impressive of the group. After accepting All Might's offer, he immediately began training with One for All. Of course, with Aizawa ever present and one blink away from erasing the quirk, should Hitoshi risk injury again. Izuku's analyses, as always, shine here. If we ignore the whole history and legacy of One for All, we will see that the quirk is nothing special. It is just a stockpiling quirk. Theories about All Might's quirk are many on the internet, but from what Izuku sees here, it is easy to tell that it is not a strength enhancer. One for All is simply energy, an almost infinite source of energy that continues to grow stronger with each new user. Izuku also theorizes that perhaps All Might is not as quirkless as he thought. Many presumably quirkless people actually have quirks that are either so weak as to be imperceptible or have activation requirements so specific that the user has never been able to activate them. Izuku theorizes that All Might's case is the former. The muscular form of All Might has all the characteristics of a transformation quirk. If Izuku is correct, this was All Might's original quirk, but he could only activate it after it was strengthened by One for All, in the same way that Hitoshi's quirk was strengthened by One for All. Anyway, Hitoshi's training was much more focused on control than power. After all, brute force for Hitoshi will always be Plan B. The primary plan is to try to hypnotize the enemy and make them surrender without the need for confrontation. Not to mention that Hitoshi decided to pursue the career of a Twilight hero, so he doesn't intend to try to become the #1 hero. He doesn't need to call attention to himself. A little too early for Hitoshi's taste, the morning of the sports festival has begun. At the Aizawa residence, everyone was getting ready to leave when Izuku's phone rang. Duality speaking. Izuku answered the call, and his smile soon dropped. "I'm on my way." "Where to?" Aizawa asked. "Hasu," Izuku replied. "We need to go now." They saw Stentul. "Be careful, Izuku," Aizawa said. "You know he won't be easy." "We know, Dad." Izuku nodded and went to the door. "We will be coordinating with Team Idaten for this mission. Say hi to Tensei for me, and call me as soon as the mission is over." Aizawa replied. "I don't care if it's in the middle of the 3rd event. I'll answer you." "We will. Make sure to get the recordings from Nenzu. We will watch this festival if it is the last thing I do," Izuku said as they stepped out of the door. Then they stopped, turned to Hitoshi, and tackled him into a hug. "Good luck, Toshi. You'll do great today." Saying that, they left and jumped off the fucking balcony. Hitoshi almost had a heart attack as he ran up to the balcony and looked down. He then saw Izuku flying at high speed in the direction Hitoshi assumed was Hasu's. "Do they always do that?" Hitoshi asked. "No, usually Kuzu does a little show before jumping." Aizawa shrugged and returned to his coffee mug. "They were in a hurry. How come you are not gray yet?" Hitoshi asked as he pulled himself a mug. "I met them when they were 8. And the first time we talked they jumped off a building." Aizawa replied. "If I had a nickel for every time they almost gave me a heart attack, I could fill a swimming pool and swim in the money." "That's rough," Hitoshi commented. "You haven't seen half of it." Aizawa sighed tiredly. "Anyway, Izuku left and I doubt you want burnt toast for breakfast before the sports festival. Get dressed up and we'll get something to eat before we go." Hitoshi nodded and went to his room to put on his uniform. How the hell did Hisashi manage to hook Shouta into the commentator's booth? That's the last time Shouta bets with him on Uno. Damn loud blonde cheater. To make matters worse, he won't even have Izuku's company as expected. Shouta looks at his cell phone for the 20th time in the last hour. Obviously, Hisashi notices. "Come on, Shu. The baby will be alright," Hisashi said, smiling. "You know he's capable." "I know, Zashi," Shouta sighed. "But it's Stain we're talking about. How many victims has he already made?" "I stopped counting after the 30th, Hisashi replied. "But Izuku has been studying his patterns for years, not to mention all the information Dabai was able to dig up. If anyone can catch Stain, it's him." "On that we agree." Shouta smirked. "And where's Taoya?" "I'd rather die than be a commentator on this thing," Hisashi said, emulating Dabai's voice. "So he'll be assisting Nemuri instead," he said, grinning. "I imagine that he is reevaluating his life choices at this very moment," Shouta replied. "Oh, totally," Hisashi grinned. "Oh, it's about to begin." "Well," Shouta sighed, "let's get it over with." The sports festival was about to begin, and everyone's nervousness was apparent. At least half of the students were pacing around in the waiting room. Others, like Bakugo, were a bit more subtle in their anxiety. The blonde disguised his nervousness with confidence. But it only takes a little attention to realize how many times he needed to grab a special handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his hands. Hitoshi was also anxious, but for different reasons. To be honest, he didn't even intend to get past the first event. His control over One for All is still basic at best. But at the same time, there is someone he wants to impress. Someone who, at this moment, is in another city on a mission. By the way, who the hell is Stendhal? Izuku had mentioned that name a few times but refused to elaborate when Hitoshi asked. The only thing he knows is that whoever he is dangerous. Tokoyami, Kaminari, Shinso. Hitoshi looked up and saw Todoroki looking straight at him. Objectively speaking, I think I am stronger than you. However, the four of us were trained by Izuku. Your point? Hitoshi asked, raising an eyebrow. I owe him a lot, and I intend to prove that it was worth it, Todoroki replied, and Hitoshi could swear his eyes were glowing from how intense they were. He never saw so much emotion in his bicolor colleague. Consider this a declaration of war. I intend to go all out to defeat you. Kaminari closed the case he was looking at. He had a choker on his neck that looked like just decoration but was, in fact, the new support gear made to keep his electricity away from his brain. Students in the hero course can use up to 2 pieces of support gear as long as it has been pre-approved by the principal, power loader, and their homeroom teacher. Most didn't take much advantage of this, but Hitoshi saw that the case Kaminari was looking at had something other than the choker. Whatever it is, the loud blonde has a card up his sleeve. Well, what can I say to that? Kaminari grinned. I accept the challenge, dude. I will show you what I am made of. I prefer to hide in the darkness, but this situation requires us to show ourselves. Tokoyami nodded. We'll make Izu proud of us. Dark Shadow chirped. Hitoshi smiled as he made his decision. He adjusted his capture scarf on his neck and turned to Todoroki. Very well, Todoroki-kun. He sent his best impersonation of Aizawa's grin. But I don't intend to lose, and I'm sure no one else intends to lose either. So it's better if you give your all. Guys, it's time, Iida said and started organizing the students into a single line to enter the stadium. It was not originally Hitoshi's plan to attract attention, but after that declaration of war, let no one ever say that he is a coward. Izuku was sitting on top of the tallest building in Hasu. On his mask, each eye showed the images of one of his cameras flying at high speed through the city's alleys. To capture Stain, the Iida team sent several heroes and sidekicks specialized in speed, but Izuku is the only one who can fly. In the same way that 90% of the heroes with fire quirks were concentrated in Endeavor's agency, 90% of the flying heroes are part of the Hawk's agency. Unfortunately, Team Iida doesn't have anyone who can fly despite its many highly mobile heroes. This deficiency meant that Izuku alone ended up in charge of patrolling the city from the skies. Their cameras can focus on 2 places at once, but their search radius is still limited. But this minor inconvenience will not stop Izuku. Stendhal often attacks heroes who patrol alone. To minimize the chances of a surprise attack, each hero is moving with at least 2 sidekicks. Each alley is being carefully searched for any clue to his whereabouts. Ingenium speaking. Izuku heard on his comms. I have visual contact with the target. Sending location. Izuku received the location on his phone. Duality speaking. Izuku replied. On my W. He saw me and is running away. Ingenium said. I'm giving chase. Ingenium out. Wait, stop, Ingenium. Don't go alone. Izuku said, but there was no reply. Damn it, we need to hurry. Zuku said. No other hero can keep up with Ingenium. When he reaches Stendhal, he will be alone. Kuzu said. At least he left his tracker activated. 5 minutes, northeast from here. Zuku said. We can get there in 2. Come on. Then they jumped from the rooftop and started flying. No hero will be maimed today. Not if they have something to say.